Hey friends. Glad you're here at Potter Vibes. We've cooked up something special. What if Nymphadora Tonks met Harry at age 7 and her Metamorphmagus core bonded to him as her only permanent form? Liking and subscribing really helps us out. Okay, story time. Chapter 1, The Girl Who Fell into the Petunias. The summer Harry Potter turned 7, he learned 3 things about the world. The first was that cupboards didn't have to be dark if you wedged the door open at exactly the right angle to catch the hallway light. The second was that Dudley's leftover toast, if you were fast enough getting to the kitchen bin, was still warm at 6 in the morning. The third, and this one took him longest to understand, was that some people made the air feel different when they walked into a room. He didn't understand the third thing until Tonks. It was a Tuesday in July, which meant Aunt Petunia had her garden club friends coming over at 2, which meant Harry had been given a list of chores so long it curled at the bottom like a scroll, and he'd been at it since dawn. The weeding was done. The path was swept. He'd washed the windows on the ground floor with vinegar and old newspaper the way Aunt Petunia liked, leaving no streaks, because streaks meant no dinner, and he was already hungry enough that the neighbor's cat was starting to look at him with something approaching sympathy. He was on his knees in the front garden, pulling up dandelions from the base of Aunt Petunia's prize rosebushes, when he heard the crash. It wasn't a quiet crash. It was the kind of crash that came in stages, a thud, then a rattling, then a very distinct thwomp followed by a sound that was either a cat being startled or a person saying something Harry was fairly sure wasn't allowed on Privet Drive. He looked up. A girl had fallen face first into Aunt Petunia's petunias. Not tripped and stumbled. Not bumped the edge of the flower bed. She had gone down completely, full length, both arms spread, nose buried somewhere near the prize-winning pink cluster Petunia had entered in last year's neighborhood competition. Her hair, which was bright, almost aggressively pink, the kind of pink that shouldn't exist in nature, was fanned out around her head like she was making a snow angel in the flowers. One of her shoes had come off somewhere in the fall and was resting upside down on the garden path. Harry stared at her. She turned her head to look at him. She had a dirt smudge across her nose, a petunia petal stuck to her cheek, and the expression of someone assembling her dignity from scattered pieces. "I meant to do that," she said. Harry looked at the shoe on the path. He looked back at her. "Did you?" he said. "Absolutely." She pushed herself up onto her elbows. "Recon. Checking the soil quality. Very important. Auror technique. You're an Auror. Trainee." She sat up fully, brushing dirt off her jacket, and pulled the petunia petal off her face with great dignity. She was young, much younger than he'd expected an Auror anything to be, maybe 17 or 18, with a round face and dark eyes that were currently doing a very thorough job of pretending the last 30 seconds hadn't happened. Her pink hair had gone slightly uneven, the left side lighter than the right, like it was trying to decide what color to be. "Don't tell anyone about this." "I don't really talk to anyone," Harry said honestly. She looked at him properly for the first time, really looked, the way most adults didn't bother, and something shifted in her expression. Not pity. He'd had enough pity from teachers who noticed his too big clothes and then promptly forgot about him by the following Monday. This was something more careful than pity. More attentive. "Harry Potter," she said. It wasn't a question. He tensed, shoulders coming up slightly. "Yeah. I'm Tonks." She stood, retrieved her shoe, and held out her hand. "Just Tonks. Don't call me anything else." He shook it. Her grip was firm and she shook once, properly, the way adults usually didn't bother doing with children. "Okay," he said. "What are you doing on Privet Drive?" "Routine check." She looked up at the house with the kind of neutral expression that wasn't quite neutral if you knew what to look for. Harry had learned to read expressions early. It was a survival skill. "You look like you've been out here for a while." "Since 6. It's nearly noon." There was a lot to do. He glanced at the house. Aunt Petunia hadn't come to the window yet. That was fine. He had maybe another hour before she'd appear to inspect the roses. The garden club's coming. Tonks looked at the window, then at his knees, grass-stained, one of them with a thin scrape from where he'd caught a paving stone, then back at him. When did you last have something to eat? The question was casual, almost throwaway, like she was asking about the weather. That was probably why Harry answered it. Yesterday dinner, he said. And then, because she was still looking at him with that particular kind of attention, I had some toast this morning, but it was from the bin. The thing that crossed her face then was fast and hot, and she controlled it almost immediately, but Harry saw it. It wasn't pity. It was anger, clean and sharp and pointed at something that wasn't him. Right, she said, quietly. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a somewhat squashed paper bag. She held it out. Inside were 4 slightly battered jam donuts, the kind with icing sugar dusted over the top. Harry looked at them. His stomach made a sound that was less a growl and more a small desperate prayer. I was going to eat them on the bus, she said, in the same casual tone, but I'm not really hungry. Auror training, you know. Terrible for the appetite. This was obviously a lie. She was the kind of person who was obviously hungry in a fundamental, ongoing way. She had that quality of someone who ate enthusiastically and often. But she said it so smoothly and handed the bag over so naturally that it gave him room to take them without it being charity. He took one and bit into it. The sugar hit the back of his throat and his eyes went involuntarily half-closed. Good? She asked. Yeah, he managed. She sat down on the garden wall, uninvited, but not aggressively so, the way someone sits down who's used to making themselves comfortable in spaces that belong to other people. Her hair had settled to an even pink now. He kept looking at it. He couldn't help it. Your hair, he said, between donuts. What about it? Is it real? She grinned, and it transformed her face entirely, wider than it should have been, slightly uneven, the kind of grin that had been happening since childhood and hadn't been disciplined into something more refined. Yeah. I'm a Metamorphmagus. It means I can change how I look. The hair's my default. It goes pink when I'm happy. She paused. Or when I've just fallen into someone's petunias and need to laugh or I'll cry. Can you change it right now? She tilted her head, and her hair shifted, red, then black, then a startling electric blue that made the summer air around it look pale. Then she changed her nose, flattening it slightly, then making it long and thin, then giving herself a very convincing version of Dudley's particular squashed look. Harry laughed. It came out before he could stop it, short and surprised and real, nothing performative about it. He couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed like that. He actually couldn't. He tried to think back and found he couldn't locate the memory. Tonks looked pleased in the way people look when they've done something that genuinely mattered, not something that was supposed to. And that was when it happened. Neither of them felt it in any obvious way. There was no crack of magic, no flash of light, no dramatic shift in the air. But something deep inside Nymphadora Tonks, something she'd always thought of as the restless, changeable center of herself, the part of her that never stopped shifting and couldn't commit to a shape, went very, very quiet. Like a river finding the sea. Like a compass settling north. She blinked. Her hair, which had been blue, went pink again. Not because she'd decided to make it pink. Just because it did. She looked down at her hands. She changed them, made the fingers longer, shorter, back. The ability was still there, fully functional. But underneath it, like a new note in a song she'd been singing her whole life, something had settled that hadn't been settled before. She didn't understand it yet. She would. You all right? Harry asked, watching her. Yeah, she said. Fine. She handed him another donut. Tell me about yourself. He looked at her sideways. Why? Because I asked. People don't usually ask. I'm asking. He ate the third donut while he thought about it. Then, Haltingly at first, he told her. The cupboard. The chores. The way the Dursleys looked through him like he was furniture with a persistent maintenance issue. He didn't frame it as suffering, because he didn't have a comparison point. He just described it the way you'd describe the rules of a place you'd lived in long enough to know by heart. Tonks listened without interrupting. Most adults couldn't manage that with a child. They wanted to explain things, correct things, reassure. She just listened, eyes on his face, occasionally eating an imaginary donut out of the now empty bag without seeming to notice she was doing it. How long has it been like this? She asked, when he'd wound down. Always, Harry said. She looked at the house again. The expression on her face was the clean, directional anger again, but it was longer this time, more settled. She was doing something with it, not performing it, not suppressing it, but filing it away in the manner of someone who intends to make use of it later. I'm coming back, she said. You don't have to. I know. She stood up, straightened her jacket, and looked down at him with that attentive quality that had nothing to do with pity. That's why I'm doing it. 2 weeks. I'll be back. The Dursleys, she said, pleasantly, won't notice. She tilted her head and, between one breath and the next, she was Aunt Petunia. Not approximately Petunia, not a rough impression, she was Petunia, with the thin neck and the suspicious eyes and the particular pinch at the corner of the mouth. Harry stared. Not Petunia winked at him with Petunia's eye, and it was so deeply wrong and so deeply funny that he had to press his hand over his mouth to keep from making noise. 2 weeks, she said, in her own voice, already walking back down the path. She retrieved the pink petal from where it had fallen on the path, looked at it, tucked it into her pocket for reasons that were entirely unclear. She stepped over the garden gnome that had tripped her coming in, which he noticed she had learned to step over with great deliberateness on the way out, and walked around the corner and was gone. Harry knelt back down in the flower bed. He finished pulling the dandelions. He swept the path again because the new footprints needed dealing with. He did all of this with a very strange feeling in his chest that he didn't have a name for yet. He would learn it later. It was the word anticipation. She came back in 11 days, not 14, which told him something. She came over the garden wall this time, presumably to avoid the gnome, though she still managed to catch her sleeve on the rose trellis and spend 30 seconds extracting herself with colorful language, and dropped into the back garden where Harry was attempting to mow the lawn with a mower 3 sizes too big for him. She'd brought food again. Proper food this time, sandwiches from what smelled like an actual deli, crisps, 2 bottles of lemonade. She laid it out on the garden wall with the efficiency of someone who had thought about this ahead of time. Where are they? She asked, meaning the Dursleys. Dudley's at swimming lessons. Aunt Petunia's with her friend 2 streets over. Uncle Vernon's at work until 6. Perfect. She sat on the wall and patted the space beside her. Eat first. Then I want to talk to you about something. He ate. She let him eat most of it before she started, which was deliberate and which he noticed. I need to tell you something, she said, and I need you to not be scared. Harry looked at her. I'm not scared of much. This seemed to both please her and make her briefly sad. Right. Okay. She turned to face him fully. You're a wizard, Harry. He looked at her for a long moment. I know, he said. She blinked. You, what? The things that happen. He shrugged. When Dudley's chasing me and I end up on the school roof. When I'm cold and the blanket moves. Mrs. Fig told me once that my parents were in a car crash, but Mrs. Fig looks at me like she's counting something every time she sees me, and I don't think it's my fingers. He looked at his lemonade bottle. The things that happen around me aren't normal. I know that. Tonks stared at him with the expression of someone recalibrating several assumptions at once. Then she let out a breath that was almost a laugh. Right. Okay. Faster than I thought. She rolled the lemonade bottle between her palms. What do you know about your parents? They died in a car crash. They didn't. I know that too, Harry said quietly. Because Mrs. Fig counts me like I matter, and people don't count things that don't matter. Tonks was quiet for a moment. Then, your parents were James and Lily Potter. They were both magical. Your father was brilliant, from everything I've heard, though honestly a bit of an idiot in school, but the good kind of idiot, and your mother was one of the most gifted witches of her generation. They were killed by a dark wizard. A very powerful one. Most people thought he was gone after he tried to kill you. She paused. You were 1 year old. Harry processed this. He tried to kill me. Yeah. And something stopped him. Your mother's sacrifice stopped him. The magic of it. You're the only person who's ever survived what he tried to do. She was watching him with that careful attentiveness. How are you doing with all this? Harry thought about it honestly. Better than I expected, he said. Is this why Mrs. Fig watches me? Probably. There are people who keep an eye on you. From a distance. Something shifted in her voice. From a much larger distance than they should. Are you one of them? I wasn't supposed to be. She looked at the garden wall, the familiar brickwork of Privet Drive, something she clearly found aesthetically oppressive. I was doing a different check for training. Different address. I got confused. She glanced at him sidelong. I fall into a lot of things. I noticed. But. She looked at her hands. They were doing the thing he'd noticed the first day, shifting slightly without her seeming to mean them to, the way someone's expression shifts when they're thinking hard. Something happened when I was here the last time. With my magic. What kind of something? Metamorphmagus, we have a core, she said, choosing her words with the precision of someone who'd been reading about this. Like the center of us. The part that handles the actual changing. It's usually. She waved a hand. Moving. Always moving. Looking for a form. It's why I fall over things, I get distracted by the options, basically. A wry quirk. But when you laughed, mine stopped. Harry looked at her. Stopped. It found, she paused. This is the bit that gets strange. It found a reference point. The form it defaults to when it's not working, the face I wear without thinking, it became, this. She gestured at herself. The pink hair, the round face, the dark eyes. This has been my face all week. Longer than I've ever held any face without concentrating. Is that bad? I don't think so. She sounded like she'd been having this argument with herself for 11 days. The books I found, there's almost nothing written about Metamorphmagus, it's so rare, but there are 3 accounts that mention something called a core bond. Where the magic locks onto a reference point. She looked at him. A person. Harry was quiet for a moment. Me, he said. Yeah. And you can still change. Fully. I went full Dumbledore yesterday during training and my instructor nearly had a heart attack. She made her eyebrows grow to absurd professor length for a half-second to demonstrate. It's just the default that changed. The thing my magic comes back to. Harry thought about this. He had the quality, even then, even at 7, of thinking about things from multiple angles before he spoke. It was a quality born of the kind of childhood where speaking too quickly or too carelessly had consequences. Does it bother you? He asked. That it chose without asking. She opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. That's a really good question, she said finally. Well, does it? She looked at the garden. At the petunia bed. At the gnome, which was currently glowering at the hydrangeas in the deep and personal way garden gnomes do. It bothers me that I don't understand it, she said. But no. The way it feels, she shook her head. Like putting on a coat that fits. I've never, my magic has never sat still before. Never been comfortable. Harry looked at his hands. He thought about the way the air had felt different when she'd walked into his garden. The way the feeling in his chest had stayed for 11 days, a small warm presence that hadn't had a name until he'd looked it up in Dudley's discarded school dictionary, buried under a pile of broken toys. Anticipation. Expecting something good. He hadn't known it was possible to feel that in this house. "Okay," he said. "Okay. You said you were coming back." "You did." The bond, he tried the word experimentally. "It's not like it's hurting you." "No." "Then okay." He picked up the last sandwich. "What else do I need to know about being a wizard?" Tonks stared at him for a full 3 seconds. Then she laughed, properly laughed, the unrestrained version that went with the too wide grin, and reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small, worn notebook. "I made a list," she said. "Of course you did. There's 17 points. Of course there are." They sat on the garden wall in the July afternoon, eating the last of the crisps, while Tonks worked through her 17 points about the wizarding world in the haphazard, enthusiastic order of someone who had clearly been looking forward to this conversation for 11 days. Harry asked questions that made her stop and reconsider things she'd taken for granted her whole life, and twice she had to say "I'll find out and tell you next time," which meant there had to be a next time, which she suspected she'd engineered unconsciously. When they heard the garden gate, she was gone before the latch clicked, up the wall with the agility of someone who'd done a lot of Auror training, down the other side, no sign of her except a single empty lemonade bottle that Harry had tucked behind the garden gnome where Petunia wouldn't find it. He was bent over the mower when Aunt Petunia came through the back door, looking suspicious in the reflexive way she was suspicious about Harry's entire existence. "Have you finished the lawn?" she demanded. "Yes," Harry said. She surveyed it. "You've missed a patch near the fence." He looked at the patch. He hadn't missed it, it was simply a different shade of green because the soil was wetter there. But he picked up the mower and ran it over the spot again, and Petunia went inside satisfied, and Harry straightened up and felt the warm, steady thing in his chest that he'd decided to call anticipation. "Next time," Tonks had said. She came back the following Tuesday, and the Tuesday after that, and the Tuesday after that. She was never long, an hour, sometimes 2 if the Dursleys were all out, and she was always careful, which surprised him initially because she had the energy of someone for whom carefulness was an ongoing project with mixed results. But around the Dursleys and around Privet Drive she was meticulous. Different faces, different clothes, walking past the house like a neighbor, checking before she came over the wall. She brought food every time. She'd stopped pretending there was another reason. She brought books too, after the 3rd visit, small ones, thin, the kind you could slip into a jacket pocket. A Child's First Guide to Practical Charms. A thin volume on the theory of transfiguration that was dry as dust except for the diagrams. A very old, very battered copy of Quidditch Through the Ages that she handed over with the enthusiasm of someone presenting a religious text. "You'll need this," she said. "For what?" "For life." He read them. He read them in the cupboard by wedging the door open for the hallway light, or in the garden when Aunt Petunia was inside, or under the covers by the method he'd invented involving a torch and a carefully arranged pillow fort. He'd always been a good reader. Fast and thorough, the kind who remembered things precisely without trying. Magic theory went into his head like it had always been there, waiting for him to find it. He came to the next Tuesday with questions that made Tonks sit up straighter, then laugh, then reach into her jacket for the notebook. "You've got to write that one down," she said, about a question regarding whether transfiguration could be applied recursively, which she was fairly sure it could but which she'd never actually thought to ask. "I'm asking Moody about this." "Who's Moody?" "My training instructor. He'll either say you're brilliant or put you through 2 hours of defensive drills for thinking too cleverly. 50-50. She wrote the question down. "He's also who I report to, which brings me to something I need to tell you." Harry waited. "I've told him about visiting you." She met his eyes. Not everything. Not the bond. But that I'm keeping an eye on you. He knows that things at your home aren't right, and she paused. He agrees that a closer watch is warranted. Does Dumbledore know? The name had come up in the books. In the notes she'd made. In the way Tonks sometimes half-formed a sentence and then redirected it. He'd pieced together enough to understand that there was a specific someone who had put him here. Tonks was quiet for a moment. No, she said. Not yet. Would he stop you? She considered this with more honesty than most adults would have offered a 7-year-old. Maybe, she said. He has reasons for the choices he made about you. I think some of them are good reasons. She glanced at the house. I think some of them are reasons he made for your protection that stopped being about your protection somewhere along the way and became about convenience. Harry looked at her. He was 7, but the look on his face was not a 7-year-old look. You're saying he'd want me kept like this? I'm saying, Tonks said carefully, that the people keeping watch on you from a distance haven't knocked on the door and told your aunt and uncle to feed you properly. And that makes me think knocking on the door isn't in the plan. A long pause. But you knocked on the door. I fell into the petunias, she corrected. There's a difference. I'm much harder to plan around. He almost smiled. Not quite. The almost smile was becoming something she recognized. It was the precursor, the thing that happened before he decided whether to trust the moment enough to let the real thing through. Okay, he said. Don't tell Dumbledore yet. That's what I was thinking. She handed him another book, thicker this time, with a plain green cover. The Principles of Defensive Magic, Volume 1. Start here. Chapter 3. He looked at the spine. Defensive Magic. The thing about being powerful, Tonks said, in the tone of someone passing on wisdom they wished had been passed to them sooner, is that people will always want you to be powerful for them. At them, in front of them, in directions they decide. She tapped the cover. This is about being powerful for yourself first. It's boring until chapter 3, then it gets very interesting very fast. He opened it that evening, in the cupboard, with the hallway light through the wedged door. She was right. Chapter 3 was very interesting. The thing about the bond, the thing Tonks had read and reread in those few old accounts she'd found and the one letter she'd written, carefully coded, to a specialist in rare magical inheritances, was that it wasn't a spell. It wasn't a charm someone had cast or a contract someone had signed. It was organic. Biological, almost. The way certain animals imprinted on the first sound they heard after hatching. Her magic had heard Harry laugh and decided, yes. That is the shape of what I'm for. What she hadn't expected was that it was bilateral. Not in the same way, Harry couldn't change shape, his magic wasn't metamorphic. But she noticed it on the 4th visit, then confirmed it on the 5th. When Harry was distressed, really distressed, the low-grade ongoing distress that was just the background hum of life at Privet Drive, her magic pulled. Not hard. Not dramatically. But she would be in the middle of Auror training, holding a particular form for an exercise, and feel a small insistent tug, and she would know, with a certainty that didn't require explanation, that Harry was having a bad day. She mentioned it to him on the 5th visit. I can feel you, she said, matter-of-factly, handing him a sandwich. Not clearly. Not like I can hear your thoughts. But when things are bad. He absorbed this. Is it useful? He asked. She'd thought about this. Potentially. She picked a spot of mustard off the bread. For now it mostly just makes me feel like I should be here more often. Is that a problem? For Moody's training schedule, yes. She flexed her fingers. For me, no. He nodded once, the same compact gesture she'd noticed was his version of a significant response. Most children at 7 were noise and motion. Harry did everything in small concentrated bursts, like he'd learned to live in a small space and hadn't quite unlearned it yet. She was working on that. Not deliberately, not with a plan. She just was present. She talked to him like he was worth talking to. She brought him books and food and occasionally a very small amount of completely harmless beginner magic when she was confident the Dursleys were far enough away, using her own wand to demonstrate things she then let him feel the echo of with his hands, which she was not technically supposed to do but which Moody, when she'd obliquely described it, had said was fine as long as nobody was setting anything on fire. Yet, she'd added. Yet, Moody had agreed, which was as close as he got to an endorsement. On the sixth visit she arrived to find Harry sitting on the back steps with a cut on his lip and the particular expression of someone who had recently been pushed and had decided not to push back. She sat down next to him. She didn't say anything immediately. "Dudley," he said. "I figured. It's fine. I didn't say it wasn't." She pulled a small vial from her pocket, didn't he, the healing kind, which she'd started carrying after the second visit, and held it out. He took it without fuss, applied it. The cut closed. "I could make him stop," she said. "There are a dozen ways." "I know," Harry said. "But then they'd look at me differently." She turned to look at him. "How do they look at you now?" "Like I'm nothing." He said it flatly, without self-pity, the way you'd state a weather condition. "That's easier to manage. If they think I'm something, they get scared, and scared people are dangerous." He handed the vial back. "Dudley already thinks strange things happen around me. I'd rather he just thinks I'm weird than thinks I'm a threat." Tonks was quiet for a long moment. "That," she said, "is a more sophisticated threat assessment than I managed until I was 16. Harry glanced at her. "Is that a compliment?" "It's an observation." She pocketed the vial. "But also yes." The almost smile again. Then the real one, brief, warm, slightly crooked. She'd started to collect data points on it the way a scientist might log a rare atmospheric event. She didn't tell him this because it would have been excruciating for both of them. Her magic, in that moment, settled a little deeper. Summer moved toward autumn. The Dursleys began school preparations, mostly for Dudley, who required new uniform pieces after the most recent incident involving Pudding and the tumble dryer, and Harry was given the task of hemming Dudley's old uniform trousers since Petunia had discovered he was apparently good with a needle, which he'd taught himself because the alternative was wearing trousers that puddled around his ankles. Tonks came 7 times before September arrived. Moody knew. Andromeda, Tonks's mother, who Harry hadn't met yet but who Tonks mentioned with a mixture of warmth and wariness that told him everything about that relationship, did not know. On the last visit before the school term, Tonks sat on the garden wall and said, "I've filed a formal concern report with the Auror office, about conditions here." Harry went still. "It's coded," she added quickly. "I wrote it so the specifics are vague. But there's now a record that someone checked on you and found conditions warranted monitoring." She met his eyes. "If something happens, if someone needs to act quickly, there's paperwork that says someone's paying attention. Is that what Dumbledore wants? Dumbledore doesn't know it exists." He looked at her. He looked at her for a long time with those green eyes that were already doing the thing they do for the rest of his life, looking at something and taking its full measure without blinking. "You're protecting me," he said. "And keeping it quiet. From the person who's supposed to be protecting me." "Yes." "Why?" She didn't say, "Because my magic decided you mattered." She didn't say, "Because no one else is doing it properly." She didn't say, "Because when you laughed at Dudley's nose the world rearranged itself inside me in a way I still don't have words for." She said, "Because you deserved someone in your corner before you needed a savior. And I got here first." Harry looked at the garden. The petunias, nearly finished for the season, browning at the edges. The gnome, relocated to the corner by the fence after one too many incidents, still glowering. "Okay," he said. He said it the way he'd said okay the first time she'd explained the bond, compact and final, the word doing the work of something much larger. You'll be all right this term, she asked. I'm always all right. That's not what I asked. He turned to look at her. The almost smile, then the real one. I'll be better than all right, he said. I've got chapter 7 to think about. She had given him a book on magical theory so complex it had a warning on the inside cover that it was intended for Newt-level students. He'd finished chapters 1 through 6 in a fortnight. She made a mental note to get him chapter 8. 2 weeks, she said. You said 2 weeks the first time, Harry pointed out. I know. It was 11 days. I was busy. You weren't. She laughed. It startled a bird off the fence and briefly made her hair go gold before it settled back to pink. I'll see you in 2 weeks, she said, and stood, and went over the wall with only minor rose trellis incident, and the gnome watched her go with the expression of a small vegetable creature that has seen things. Harry sat on the back steps after she left, turning the green book over in his hands, feeling the late summer sun on the back of his neck, and decided, with the particular deliberateness of someone who doesn't make decisions carelessly, that the warm thing in his chest wasn't going anywhere. He stopped looking for a name for it. It had one. It was Tonks. She was on the bus home when she noticed it properly for the first time. She'd half noticed it before, the way her face, when she wasn't concentrating, was her face. The round one, the pink-haired one, the one she'd been wearing when a 7-year-old had looked at her Petunia impression and laughed until he had to cover his mouth. She'd been taking her core's word for it, more or less. This is the shape. Fine. But on the bus, tired after a long day, guard down, she let her face go fully slack, the Metamorphmagus equivalent of putting down every weight you're carrying, and stayed with whatever came. Pink hair. Dark eyes. Her own nose, her own cheekbones, the face she'd had at 17 when she'd fallen into a garden. But the feeling of it was new. The settlement. The rightness. She put her hand against the bus window and felt the cool glass and thought about what it meant that her magic, which had never once in 20 years of existence known what it wanted to be, had found its answer in a 7-year-old boy living in a cupboard under some stairs. Not a destiny. Not a burden. A direction. She pulled out the notebook and wrote, at the bottom of the last page, below all 17 points about the wizarding world, the bond doesn't diminish anything. It clarifies. She read it over once. Put the notebook away. Watched London move past the window. And let her hair stay pink all the way home. Chapter 2, The Shape of Someone Else's Magic. The first thing Andromeda Tonks said when she found out about Harry Potter was, "How long has this been going on?" The second thing she said, before Tonks could answer, was, "Sit down. I'm making tea. This is clearly a sitting-down anti-conversation and I want to be properly prepared before I react." Tonks sat down at the kitchen table of the house in Hertfordshire that had always smelled like beeswax polish and something herbal Andromeda grew in the back garden and refused to name. Ted was at work. The kettle went on. Andromeda moved through the kitchen with the particular efficiency of a black woman who had spent decades ensuring no one could accuse her of being disorganized, which was easier to manage than the other things people tried to accuse her of. She set 2 cups down. Sat across from her daughter. Looked at her. 8 months, Tonks said. Andromeda's expression did not change. This was impressive, because Tonks had told her about the bond first, and about Harry's living conditions second, and both pieces of information were the kind that warranted significant expression changing. 8 months, her mother said. I know. You've been visiting a child, the child, Harry Potter, in secret, for 8 months, without telling me, or your father, or the order. There's no order anymore, Mom, it dissolved when, you know what I mean. Andromeda wrapped her hands around her tea. Nymphadora. Don't. I will if you make me. 8 months. I know. Tonks looked at her own cup. I kept meaning to tell you and then I'd think about what Dumbledore would do when he found out and I'd not tell you. What do you think Dumbledore would do? Move me, Tonks said. Explain very kindly and at great length why my visits are disrupting something. Give me 10 good reasons and 2 that sound good but aren't. Andromeda was quiet for a moment. She was the kind of quiet that meant she was thinking rather than composing a response, which was a distinction Tonks had learned to read. The bond, she said. Yeah. Your core settled. Yeah. On him. Yeah. Andromeda looked at her daughter's hair, which was pink in the way it had been pink almost consistently for 8 months, which in retrospect she should have noticed and followed up on much earlier. Are you all right? She asked. I'm better than I've been, Tonks said honestly. That's the weird part. I keep waiting to be disturbed by it and I'm just, not. The literature, I read everything I could find. There are 3 historical accounts and 1 theoretical paper from 1887 that uses the phrase harmonizing resonance and is otherwise not helpful. She turned her cup in her hands. Mum, he was in a cupboard. Not metaphorically. An actual cupboard under the stairs. Andromeda's face did the thing it did when she felt something strongly and was choosing not to demonstrate it at full volume. I know, she said quietly. You knew. I suspected. Dumbledore made certain choices that, she stopped. Reformulated. There are people who believe that the protection of the blood wards mattered more than the conditions within them. I am not one of those people. Tonks looked at her mother, really looked, the way she'd been learning from Harry to look at things instead of past them. Andromeda had been in the order. Andromeda had lost a sister to one side and been disowned by her family for the other and had built something quiet and deliberate out of the wreckage. She had opinions about Dumbledore that she held very still and very carefully, the way you hold something that's fragile and sharp at the same time. I want to bring him here, Tonks said. Not permanently yet. Not until we know if we can manage the ward implications. But, yes, Andromeda said. I haven't finished, you don't need to. Yes. She stood, carried her cup to the window, looked out at the back garden. Bring him for a weekend. We'll work out the wards. Your father will, she paused. Your father is going to lose his mind with happiness, you realize. A child in this house. He's been dreadfully normal since you moved out. He'll be fine. He'll make pancakes. That's fine. He'll make more pancakes. The situation will escalate. Tonks smiled, and her hair went a shade darker, something between rose and amber. That's the best possible outcome. Andromeda turned from the window. What does Harry know? About what you are. About the bond. Everything I know. Tonks met her mother's eyes. He's 7 and he processes information like a research-minded adult who happens to be small and doesn't get enough to eat. I wasn't going to condescend to him about his own situation. Andromeda considered this, and then did something she didn't do particularly often, she smiled, properly, the one that came through the composure. He sounds, she said, like someone worth knowing. Yeah, Tonks said. He really is. It took 3 months to work out the wards. Not because the magic was especially complicated, but because Andromeda was thorough in the way people are thorough when they've learned that corners cut in magical security have consequences they've seen with their own eyes. She corresponded with a ward specialist in Edinburgh under a false name. She cross-referenced the blood protection Dumbledore had placed on Privet Drive with the theoretical literature on whether such protections could coexist with secondary protections at a secondary location. They could. With the right anchoring. Tonks passed the Auror exam in February. Moody said nothing complimentary, but he looked at her scores for 3 full seconds longer than he looked at anyone else's, and for Moody that was practically a speech. She got her badge on a Wednesday. She went to Privet Drive on the Saturday. Harry was in the garden when she came over the wall. He'd been expecting her, he was always expecting her now, not anxiously but with that particular settled readiness of someone who knows a good thing is coming, and she held up the badge without preamble. He looked at it. Then at her. Auror Tonks, he said. The very same. He smiled, The real one, unguarded, full. Congratulations. She tucked the badge away. I've got something else to tell you. She sat on the wall. My mum wants to meet you. Harry went still in the way that meant he was assessing something. Andromeda. Yeah. And Ted, my dad. She watched his face. You don't have to. But they want to, and she looked at her hands. I want you to have more than one person. Okay, Harry said. You didn't let me finish. I was going to say okay regardless. She looked at him. He was 8 now, 8.5, technically, with the growth of someone who'd been underfed and was now being supplemented with regular sandwiches and occasional enormous meals when Tonks timed her visits right. He was still small for his age, but there was something about the way he held himself that had changed in the past months. Something that took up more space without taking up more physical room. You're nervous, he said. She stopped. A little. Yeah. Why? Because they're my family and she struggled for the word. The bond, he said, matter-of-factly. Yeah. I want them to understand it properly. And I want you to not feel like you're being handed around. Harry tilted his head, looking at her with the careful assessment she'd come to know. I don't feel like that, he said. You're not handing me anywhere. You're adding to something. He paused. There's a difference. She stared at him. You're 8.5. Right. And a half. Which makes this observation either advanced or mildly alarming. Probably both, he said, and picked up the trowel he'd been using. What's she like? Your mum. Tonks thought about it. Formidable, she said. Very precise. She'll look at you like she's reading the table of contents of a book and deciding whether the whole thing is worth reading. And if she decides it is, then you'll have someone very much in your corner who is much better at the paperwork than I am. Is Ted like you? Sort of. He's warm in a way that catches you off guard. He'll try to give you things. Food, books, his opinion on everything. Don't let him explain Muggle football, it goes on forever and he actually doesn't know as much as he thinks he does. Harry absorbed this. Does he know about the bond? Yes. What did he say? Tonks was quiet for a moment. He said, and I'm quoting, well, your magic's always had good instincts, love. Even when the rest of you was falling down the stairs. She paused. That's a very Ted thing to say. If you meet him you'll understand it immediately. I want to, Harry said. Simply, without embellishment. She understood what he meant. Not just I want to meet them. I want what comes with meeting them. The table with more chairs. The house that smells like beeswax and something herbal. The pancakes. She understood it because her magic had been understanding it since July. The weekend in April was sunny in the specific way English April manages on its better days, which is to say adequately warm and excessively bright, and the Tonks house garden was full of early bulbs and Ted Tonks was at the garden gate at 9 in the morning, approximately 20 minutes before Tonks and Harry arrived, which Andromeda later described as lurking with intent, and which Ted denied without any real conviction. He was a big man, Ted Tonks, broad-shouldered, with an easy smile and eyes that were currently doing their absolute best to be casual about meeting a small dark-haired boy who had just unlatched the gate with the particular wariness of someone who'd learned to be wary of houses. Harry, Ted said. Good to meet you, son. Harry looked up at him. You too, sir. Ted made a face. Ted. I'm Ted. Sir is for people with better posture. He stepped back and gestured at the house with the ease of someone who'd spent a lifetime making rooms bigger by walking into them. Come in. Dora says you've been eating sandwiches for 8 months and I've made an executive decision about breakfast. Dad, Tonks said, I told you not to make a thing of it. I haven't made a thing. I've made pancakes. That's a thing. It's breakfast. Harry was looking between them with the expression of someone watching a tennis match they'd been told was played differently from standard rules. He stepped through the gate. The house was brick and ivy and ordinary in the way that felt like a specific, deliberate choice rather than an accident, like someone had decided ordinariness was worth achieving and had worked at it. Andromeda was waiting in the kitchen. She looked at Harry for the 3 seconds Tonks had predicted, the table of contents look, precise and unhurried. Harry looked back. Neither of them blinked. "You're smaller than I expected," Andromeda said. "People keep saying that," Harry said. "They'll stop when you're not." "That's what Tonks says too." Something moved in Andromeda's eyes. She pulled out a chair, the good chair, the one at the corner with the best view of both the garden and the kitchen, which Tonks had always fought her siblings for at the breakfast table and which she hadn't known her mother assigned on purpose until right now. "Sit down," Andromeda said. "Ted made pancakes. I don't know why he's standing there, he knows where the pan is." "I'm doing a welcome," Ted said. "You've welcomed him." He sat down. "Make the pancakes." Harry sat at the corner chair and looked at the garden through the window, and Tonks dropped into the chair opposite, and for a moment it was just the sound of the pan going on and Ted humming something tuneless and Andromeda pouring tea and the garden outside bright with April morning. Harry's shoulders came down. Not all the way. Not in the dramatic fashion of someone releasing tension they've been cataloging. Just, down, by a few degrees, like a knot easing rather than coming undone. But she noticed it because she'd been watching for it, because her magic had been telling her for months that certain things were held too tight and too long, and watching the knot ease by any degree at all felt like something worth noting. She caught Andromeda's eye across the table. Her mother nodded once, the precise minimal version, which meant, "I see it too." Ted made an absolutely unreasonable quantity of pancakes. The weekend became a monthly occurrence. Then fortnightly. By Harry's 9th birthday it was simply what happened. Harry came to the Tonks house when the Dursleys were conveniently occupied or could be managed with a precisely placed confusion charm that Tonks applied with increasing refinement and zero guilt. Moody, when she admitted to the confusion charms, had looked at her over his desk for a long moment and then said, "You're not charging them, are you? For the application of magic at a private residence?" "No." "Good. I'd hate to have to discipline you." He'd turned back to his paperwork. "I've submitted a supplementary concern flag to the child welfare desk at the ministry. Anonymously." "You didn't hear that." She'd stared at the back of his scarred head for a moment. "I didn't hear anything." "Good. Close the door on your way out." Harry, meanwhile, was reading at a pace that alarmed everyone who encountered it. By 9 he'd consumed the entirety of the first-year Hogwarts curriculum, not because Tonks had said it, but because she'd left books within reach and he had the instincts of someone who understood that knowledge was the one form of preparation the Dursleys couldn't take from him. He asked good questions. Better than good, the kind of questions that reframed the thing they were asking about. Andromeda had started sitting in when Tonks explained magical theory, nominally to provide correction, but increasingly to contribute because Harry's questions opened angles she hadn't considered. "Why can't a Patronus be cast by someone who doesn't believe in the thing it's protecting?" he asked one evening, 9 and curled in the corner chair with a book on advanced defensive magic open on his knee. Andromeda looked up from her own book. "That's a complex, where did you read about patron uses?" Chapter 12. He held up the book. "That's a Newt-level text." "I know." He waited. She thought about the question. Genuinely thought, the way she did when something didn't have a quick answer. "It might not be about belief in the thing it's protecting," she said slowly. "It might be that the Patronus is composed of your own happiest memories, and a person who doesn't believe they deserve protection tends not to maintain access to those memories under pressure." Silence. "That's," Tonks started. "Different from what the book says," Harry said. "The book is simplified." Andromeda set down her own text. "What happy memory do you think you'd use?" He didn't answer immediately. He looked at the fire in the grate, the one Ted lit every evening regardless of weather because he was a person who lit fires in the evening and felt strongly about this. Then he looked up at Tonks. She held very still. "This," he said. "Simply being here." Her magic settled into the bottom of her chest like a stone settling into deep water. Not pulling or straining. Just, there. Present. "Then you'll make an excellent Patronus," Andromeda said, in the tone of someone reporting a fact. Harry looked back at his book. The conversation was over because he'd decided it was over, which was a thing he did, not rudely, but with the quiet certainty of someone who knows when something has been said completely. Ted came in 20 minutes later with hot chocolate and the beginning of a lengthy and factually imprecise explanation of a specific football match, and Harry asked interested questions that kept the man talking for 40 minutes while Tonks sat on the floor and pretended to read and quietly felt something in her chest that she'd given up naming and simply kept. There was, inevitably, the day Dumbledore came. Harry was 9 years and 4 months old. It was October, grey and cold, and Tonks had been at the ministry dealing with paperwork that was doing its absolute best to devour her afternoon when she felt the pull. Not the gentle, ambient kind that meant Harry was having a bad day. The sharp kind. She was out of her chair before she'd processed the decision, past her colleague's startled face, through the door and into the corridor where she shifted her face without thinking, auburn, unremarkable, and Auror to Privet Drive without stopping to file a leave form. She arrived on the street to find Dumbledore standing at the front gate. He was alone. Watching the house. Not doing anything, just watching, with the patience of someone who has been watching things for a very long time and has learned that patience is its own kind of power. He heard her before she'd decided how to approach. She had good feet, Auror trained, genuinely quiet, but Dumbledore had the kind of awareness that had nothing to do with hearing. "Auror Tonks," he said, without turning around. She straightened. She was in her own face, had shifted back somewhere between apparition and landing, which meant the bond had been pulling her toward Harry and the default form had won. She filed that away for later. "Professor," she said, coming to stand beside him. "Bit far from Hogwarts." "I make a point of visiting Harry periodically," he said. "To check in." He looked at the house. The curtains were closed. Inside, she could feel Harry, tense, watchful, that coiled spring quality she recognized as him having decided to be extremely careful about something. "Though I find I'm not the only one making such visits." She kept her expression neutral. Routine welfare follow-up. Part of the Auror training protocol. 8 months of routine visits. He turned to look at her then, and she met his eyes, blue and ancient and genuinely kind and calculating in a way that didn't cancel out the genuineness but didn't disappear behind it either. "I notice you haven't filed any formal reports with the relevant oversight desks." "I filed one with the Auror office." "Coded. Standard." A long pause. An October leaf blew across the path between them. "Your mother was an excellent witch," he said. "And you are apparently more like her than either of you knew." She didn't answer that, because it wasn't a question and because answering it either way would give him something she wasn't sure she wanted to give him yet. "He's well?" Dumbledore asked. The question was genuine. She was good enough now at reading people to hear that. "Better than he was," she said. "His family are not unkind enough to arrest and not kind enough to matter." She kept her voice even. "He has food and books and better things to think about." Dumbledore looked at her for a long moment. He was putting something together, she could see it, the assembling of information into a picture he hadn't had before. He was looking at her hair, which was pink, which it always was, which it had been since July 2 years ago. "The bond," he said quietly. She held still. "I've read about such things," he said. "Very rare. Not dangerous, not in the way most would think." He paused. "Not planned, I imagine." "No. And yet." He turned back to the house. "You are perhaps exactly what he needed." And perhaps not what was planned. No, she said again. I tend not to fit into plans. Something moved in his eyes that might have been appreciation. No. You don't. He straightened. I won't interfere with what you're doing. I think it probable that it is doing him good. But I would ask, he turned fully to face her, and his voice was quiet and serious in a way that wasn't a command but wasn't quite not one either. I would ask that you be careful about how much you show him before he's ready. The world has large expectations of Harry Potter. It would be a cruelty to let him be himself first, she said. He looked at her. Because that's what I'm doing, she said. I'm not preparing him for a role. I'm just talking to him. Feeding him. Bringing him books. She met those ancient blue eyes without flinching. He'll be ready for whatever the world needs. He's the most naturally capable person I've ever trained with, including people twice his age and 10 times his formal education. But he's a person first. The silence stretched. Yes, Dumbledore said finally. He is. And there was something in it, something that sounded, under the complicated layers of the man, like genuine regret. I hope you understand that the choices I made, were made for reasons, Tonks said. I know. I don't think they were wrong reasons. I think they stopped being about Harry somewhere and became about the plan, and I think you know that too. He looked at her for a long time. Then he nodded once, adjusted his robes, and said, Good afternoon, Auror Tonks. I believe I'll leave the welfare check to you today. You seem more qualified. He walked back down the road. She watched him go, the tall figure in robes that were slightly too dramatic for a Surrey Tuesday, the long white hair, the particular walk of someone who carries a great deal and has arranged it carefully. She waited until he was around the corner. Then she went over the garden wall, still catching the rose trellis, she was absolutely going to have a scar from this, and knocked at the back door. Harry opened it after 2 seconds. Dumbledore was here, he said. I know. He left. What did he say? That he's leaving you to me. She stepped inside, looking at him, the tension still in his shoulders, the sharp quality of his attention. He knows about the bond. Harry processed this. Is that a problem? No, she said. And found, to her own mild surprise, that she meant it. I think it's actually fine. He relaxed, fractionally. You want tea? God, yes. He put the kettle on with the ease of someone who'd been making tea in this kitchen for 2 years, Petunia's kitchen, grim and beige, but Harry moved through it without deference, like it was a space he occupied rather than one he was permitted. Another knot, another degree of loosening. She sat at the kitchen table and watched him and thought about what Dumbledore had said, perhaps exactly what he needed, and then stopped thinking about it because the kettle was boiling and Harry was asking about the Patronus chapter and she had something interesting to tell him about memory and magic and the way the two of them worked together that she'd been thinking about for 3 months. They talked until the light changed and the Dursleys' car turned into the road and Tonks was out the back door and over the wall before the engine stopped. Standing on the pavement in the October grey, her hair pink and her jacket smelling of someone else's kitchen, she felt her magic sitting quietly at the center of her, pointed north. The summer Harry turned 10, Tonks took him to Diagon Alley for the first time. This required planning, because Harry technically wasn't supposed to have wizarding things yet, wasn't supposed to know, officially, about his vault, about Gringotts, about the world he'd be entering in 12 months, but Tonks had decided that the official timeline was a tool and not a law and had arranged everything through Andromeda and Ted, who came along as the relevant adults with relevant documentation. Harry walked into the leaky cauldron and didn't gape at the magical people around him the way she'd expected, because she'd described it to him enough times that the description had become a kind of familiarity. He looked at everything with that careful, systematic attention, the barman, the flagged floor, the archway into Diagon Alley itself, and then looked up at her with the particular expression that was his version of excitement, which looked on most people like thoughtfulness. Ted tapped the bricks with his wand and the wall folded back and Harry watched this process with parted lips, which was as close to open wonder as he got, and Tonks filed it away as one of the good moments, the kind she'd been collecting since July 2 years ago and kept somewhere that didn't need a location. Gringotts first, Andromeda said. Then we'll see. The goblins looked at Harry in the way goblins look at people, which is to say with no particular deference to status or legend and a great deal of interest in financial specifics, and one of them, examining his key, said something in a low voice to another that Tonks caught the edge of and filed away for later. Something about the vault. Something about the objects in it. Harry's vault contained more gold than she'd imagined. He looked at it with the expression of someone recalibrating a number. "This is mine," he said. "Not a question." "Yours," Ted confirmed. "Your parents' estate." Harry took what he needed without drama, pocketed it, and turned for the door. "Okay," he said. "Books first." They spent 4 hours in Diagon Alley. Harry moved through it with the focused efficiency of someone who has been thinking about this list for 12 months and is not going to be distracted by the moving statuettes in the window of Potage's cauldron shop no matter how interesting they are. He bought books. Advanced books, not the first-year list, not the introductory texts. He asked the bookshop owner specific questions about which theoretical volumes had been revised recently and which were still using pre-1970s frameworks for transfiguration theory. The bookshop owner looked at him for a moment and then called to someone in the back, and there was a 10-minute conversation at the counter that left Harry with a list of 6 additional titles and a recommendation to check a specific bookshop in Edinburgh. Tonks leaned against a shelf. "You know most third years don't read this section." "I'm not a third year." "You're not any year yet." "Then I'm not bound by year expectations." He picked up a volume on elemental transfiguration and turned to the index without breaking stride. She looked at the title over his shoulder. Newt Level. One of the books that had a warning about complexity on the inside cover. "You've already read this one," she said. "I want the new edition. The old one has outdated notes on switching spells in Chapter 9. He turned to Chapter 9 to check. Found what he was looking for. Put the book in the basket. She shook her head. But she was smiling. They had lunch at a small table outside Florian Fortescue's ice cream parlor, which was Tonks's suggestion and which Ted endorsed with great enthusiasm. Harry ate a chocolate sundae with the attentiveness he gave everything, and watched the street, and asked questions about the people walking past. "The woman with the orange robes, what's that fabric?" "Acromantula silk," Andromeda said. "Very expensive." "She's probably from the continent, that cut is more Paris than London." "The man with the green stripe in his robe is ministry," Harry said. "Third or fourth level, I'd guess, the cut's expensive but not extravagant, and he keeps looking at his watch the way people do when they're counting time back to something official." Andromeda looked at the man, then back at Harry. "How long have you been doing that?" "Reading people?" "Yes." Harry considered. "Always, I think." He ate a spoonful of ice cream. "At the Dursleys you had to know what kind of mood Uncle Vernon was in before he came through the door. Whether Dudley was bored and therefore looking for someone to bother. You read people to know what's coming." A pause. Ted reached over and refilled his sundae from the extra they'd ordered, which was absolutely not because of this conversation and absolutely because of this conversation. "At Hogwarts," Andromeda said, carefully, "you'll meet people who haven't had to develop those skills. And they'll have different skills instead. It's worth being aware of." "I know," Harry said. "I'm not better than them for it." "I didn't say, but you were going to add it," he said, without accusation. "I could tell." He looked at her. "I know that being able to read a room quickly doesn't make me smarter than someone who learned to be kind quickly. I've had both things from Tonks and they're different and both of them matter." Tonks looked at him so fast her chair scraped. "That is, when did I teach you to be kind?" "Every time you came back," Harry said simply, and went back to his sundae. Ted Tonks was a man of considerable emotional resilience and he was looking at the middle distance with his jaw slightly tight for about 30 seconds. Andromeda, who had faced down her family in social exile and worse, blinked twice, once, and then said in a perfectly steady voice, "Finish your ice cream, Harry. We have more books to look at." Tonks sat in the afternoon sun in Diagon Alley with her pink hair and the kind of feeling in her chest that felt like something being built out of small moments, each one not enough on its own, but together becoming something with walls and windows and a door that closed properly against the cold. The summer Harry turned 10 was also the summer Tonks made the decision she'd been approaching for 2 years and finally committed to. She transferred from standard Auror work to a specialist role in protective surveillance, the kind of detail work that meant she spent long hours watching for specific targets, maintaining specific cover identities, learning to hold a form for 8 hours without strain. The form she practiced holding most often was her own. Not because it was hard, it was the easiest, the default now, had been since July 2 years ago, but because she wanted to be absolutely certain that when she held it by choice rather than by habit. There was a difference. She'd worked out the difference in the first 6 months and had been quietly making it deliberate ever since. Moody noticed, because Moody noticed everything. "You've steadied," he said, on the day she held a surveillance form for a record 12 hours without breaking. "Not a question." "I have," she said. "The bond. Part of it. The rest is just work." She cleaned her wand with the small cloth she kept in her jacket. "I know what I'm working toward." He looked at her with the mismatched eyes, the real one and the magical one that saw everything and spared you nothing. "He's going to Hogwarts next year." "I know. Things will change. Things change. The direction doesn't." A long pause. Moody's version of approval was silence rather than noise, the absence of criticism being its own form of commendation. "You'll need someone at Hogwarts," he said. "Not you, too obvious." "Someone who can, I'm working on it," she said. "I know. I'm just telling you I'm not aware of it." He waved his hand. "Go home. You've been on surveillance for 12 hours. Get some sleep." She went home. She ate dinner. She sat at her desk and wrote a letter, long and careful, with some phrases encoded and some left plain because the person she was writing to was going to read the encoded parts anyway and she might as well save them the work. She sealed it. She sent it with her owl. The reply came in 3 days, which was fast for this particular correspondent. "He'll be in good hands," it read, in a handwriting she recognized. "He already is. I'll watch from my end. You watch from yours." It wasn't signed. She didn't need it to be. She folded the letter. Put it in the drawer with the others. Went to bed with her hair pink and her magic at rest, and 11 months before Harry's Hogwarts letter arrived to think about everything she still wanted to teach him. She lay in the dark and thought about it all, the cupboard, the garden, the gnome, the donuts, the look on his face in the leaky cauldron when the wall opened into something enormous, the way he'd said this when Andromeda asked about the Patronus memory, the way he'd said every time you came back in a voice like a fact rather than a gift. She stared at the ceiling. Her magic was quiet. Her hair was pink. She slept. 1 month before the letter arrived, Tonks brought Harry something that wasn't a book. It was a wand. Not his wand, that would come from Ollivander's, in the proper way, because whatever else she chose to do around the official timeline she wasn't going to take that from him. But a practice wand, hollowed out, the core replaced with a crystal that would resonate with magical intent without channeling it into active spells. A training tool, technically, that instructors used with young students before formal schooling. Technically. It wouldn't cast. But it would respond. It would hum in the hand, would tell you something about your intent, your focus, your control. Would give you feedback the way a musical instrument gives you feedback before you learn the actual notes. Harry turned it over in his hands. He looked at her. "You've been doing theory for 2 years," she said. "This isn't casting. It's just, getting comfortable," he said. "Right." He held it properly. She described proper wand grip 3 times over the past year and he'd been listening, and stood in the back garden of the Tonks house on a September afternoon with Ted making noise in the kitchen and Andromeda reading on the bench by the roses, and he focused. The crystal lit. Not dramatically. Not explosively. It lit with the steady, warm, unwavering glow of something that had found its connection immediately and had no interest in performance. Andromeda looked up from her book. Ted appeared in the kitchen window. Harry was looking at the light in his hand with an expression she'd never seen on him before, open, wholly unguarded, not reading the room or assessing the risk or filing anything away. Just present in the moment. Just 10 years old and holding light in his hand for the first time. "Tonks," he said quietly. "Yeah." Her voice came out low. "Is this what it always feels like?" She thought about the first time her own magic had done something intentional. The surprise of it, the rightness. "Yeah," she said. "Exactly like that." He held the light for a long time. The September afternoon moved around him, warm and gold, and in the kitchen Ted was making something that smelled like dinner and Andromeda had put down her book entirely and her magic was at the center of her, settled and pointed north, and Harry Potter was 10 years old and standing in a garden holding light in his hand like he'd always known it would be there. 11 months until the letter. She was ready. She suspected, looking at him, that he'd been ready for a while. Chapter 3, Before the letter arrives. The dog showed up on a Wednesday. Harry was 10 and 8 months, which meant the Hogwarts letter was 4 months out, which meant Tonks had been running a quiet, meticulous countdown in the back of her head for approximately 6 months and was currently in the middle of recertifying her tracking charms when her office door opened and Moody walked in looking like a man who'd swallowed a prophecy. He closed the door. He sat down. He put both hands flat on her desk. "Sirius Black escaped Azkaban last night," he said. Tonks put her quill down. "They're not releasing it publicly yet," Moody continued. 24 hours, maybe 48 before the Prophet gets it. The minister wants containment first." He watched her face. "He was your mother's cousin. I know who he is. He's also Harry Potter's godfather." She was already out of her chair. "Sit down," Moody said. "I need to, he's in Surrey." "Still in Surrey. We have a trace on the area from the Azkaban breach and the magic hasn't moved. He's not going after the boy, not yet, and maybe not ever." He waited until she sat, which took longer than sitting usually takes. "Tell me what you know about Black." She knew what everyone knew. What you couldn't help knowing if you'd grown up on the edge of the wizarding world during the war: Sirius Black, the blood traitor, the one who turned on his own and then turned on the Potters, given you know who the address, gotten Peter Pettigrew killed, laughed in the street. 12 years in Azkaban. Mass murderer. Every Auror's poster child for irredeemable. She also knew what her mother had never said out loud but had made clear in the way people make things clear when they don't say them, that the official story had edges that didn't quite line up, that Andromeda had gone very quiet when the verdict came down without trial, that the folder on Sirius Black in the Auror archives had a suspicious absence of documentation from the actual night in question. "I know the official record," she said. "I also know there was no trial." Moody looked at her. "No. Moody, that's a significant problem, yes. One that nobody in authority has been particularly motivated to examine, given that the man in question frightened them thoroughly and was clearly, at minimum, guilty of some things." He leaned back. "I'm not saying he's innocent. I'm saying I'm not certain he's guilty of the specific thing he's in for." The room was quiet. "He's heading for Harry," she said. "Possibly. Or he's heading for the area in the way someone heads for the only thing that mattered before 12 years in Azkaban made everything else fall apart." Moody watched her. "What I need to know is whether you're going to go there now and do something that makes this complicated, or whether you're going to go there with a plan." She looked at the tracking charm she'd been recertifying. Back at Moody. "I need 20 minutes. You have 15. I'll file the paperwork that says you're on approved surveillance." He stood. "Tonks. He waited until she looked at him. Be careful with him. Azkaban does something to people that isn't just time. If he's been holding on to something, if that's how he got out, he might be more functional than expected. Or he might be in pieces. You won't know until you're looking at him. And if he's going for Harry? The magical eye went very still. Then you do your job. She was out the door in 2 minutes with a modified tracking charm running and a plan that was approximately 40% solid and 60% instinct, which was a better ratio than most of her plans operated on, and she'd learned to trust it. She found him 3 streets from Privet Drive. Not in human form, a dog, enormous and black, the kind of black that wasn't a color so much as an absence of light. He was sitting in the shadows between a parked car and a garden wall with the absolute stillness of something that had survived by being invisible. His ribs showed. His fur was dull. But his eyes, when they caught her, were not the eyes of a broken animal. They were alert. Calculating. Exhausted in a way that went much deeper than tired. She stood 6 feet away with her wand loose in her hand, not raised, not threatening, but present, and looked at him, and he looked at her, and for about 4 seconds neither of them moved. Then he shifted. Dog to man, which she'd read was a difficult transformation for an Nymphadora in compromised condition, but he managed it without apparent strain, which told her something important about how long he'd been practicing this particular exit from Azkaban. Sirius Black was 35 years old and looked 60. Or he looked 22, depending on which part of him you were looking at. His face was gaunt, the cheekbones too sharp, the skin a color that said 6 months from sunlight at minimum. But his eyes, dark and quick and with the particular sharp wit of someone who had held on to their sense of humor as a survival mechanism, those were young. Or perhaps ageless. The way things are when they've been too close to something that ages everything else. He looked at her face. Her pink hair. Made the connection. Andromeda's girl, he said. His voice was rough, underused. Tonks, she said. Yes. You're an Auror. Yes. He looked at her wand. At her face. At the space between them. He was doing the same calculation she was, which was, are we going to do this the hard way or the useful way? I'm not here for the boy, he said. You're 4 streets from him. I know where he is. He looked at his own hands, large-knuckled, scarred, the hands of someone who'd spent 12 years with nothing to do but think. I needed to know he was alive. I needed to see. He stopped. I'm not going to hurt him. You haven't seen him, Tonks said. You haven't confirmed he's alive. You're just sitting in the dark. I couldn't, something moved across his face. I haven't been able to move properly since I got out. He seemed to find this admission deeply objectionable but made it anyway. Azkaban does something to the distance between deciding to do something and actually doing it. She studied him. She wasn't a healer but she'd been trained to assess magical and psychological damage, and what she was looking at was a man who had arrived at the edges of himself 12 years ago and had been surviving there ever since. What got you out? She asked. What did you hold on to? He looked up at her. They let us have the Prophet on Sundays, he said. Last year, the paper, the photograph on the front page. A rat with a missing finger sitting on a fat boy's shoulder. Tonks kept her expression still and her mind moving fast. Peter, Sirius said, and the name came out in a register that wasn't anger, wasn't grief, was something older and colder than either. Peter Pettigrew. Who everyone thinks I killed. Who lost his finger the night I found him. He paused. I didn't get the Potters killed. He did. He was the secret keeper. Not me. He looked at his hands again. I know how it sounds. It sounds, Tonks said carefully, like something that should have had a trial. He looked at her sharply. A quick, assessing look, the kind that happened when someone says the thing you expected them not to say. She made a decision. Not a careful, considered one, the kind that came from the part of her that had been refining itself for 3 years, the part that the bond had steadied and the work had sharpened. She put her wand away. He watched this. "I could run," he said. "You could try," she said pleasantly. "I'm faster than I look and I've been training for 3 years. But I'd rather not chase you, because I have somewhere I need to be." She looked at him steadily. "I'm going to tell you something, and then I'm going to give you a choice. Harry is fine. He's more than fine, he's probably the most prepared 10-year-old for Hogwarts in the last century. He has people looking after him." She paused. "Including me." Sirius stared at her. "The bond," he said. Slowly. "Andromeda mentioned, years ago, that a Metamorphmagus bond was, she said it was theoretical. It's apparently not." Tonks looked at the wall behind him, the ordinary brick and mortar of suburban Surrey, and felt her magic quiet and present at her center. He laughed at something I did and my core decided it had found what it was looking for. "I've been coming here for 3 years. He eats regularly, he reads at newt level, and he has a practice wand response that would make your instructors at Hogwarts genuinely frightened if they knew about it." Sirius Black sat in the shadows between a car and a garden wall and something moved through his face that she'd seen before, in a much smaller version, on Harry's face when something shifted from hypothesis to fact, the recalibration, the reordering. "He's all right," Sirius said. "He's all right." A long pause. "You should arrest me." "Technically yes." She folded her arms. "Or I can take you somewhere safe for the next 48 hours while I make a series of phone calls and file some paperwork that will either trigger a proper investigation of your case or make me extremely unpopular with the ministry, and we'll see which one happens first." He looked at her for a long time. "Why?" "Because there was no trial," she said. "And because the only person I've ever met who mattered enough to my magic to reorganize it is your godson. And because," she stopped. "Because my mother goes quiet when your name comes up, and she only goes quiet about things that were done wrong." Another long pause. Then Sirius Black did something she didn't expect. He laughed, short, rough, rusty, like something that hadn't been used in 12 years. "Andromeda's girl," he said again, but this time it meant something different. "All right. Where are we going?" They went to a safe house Tonks had been maintaining through the Auror office, nothing grand, a flat above a dry cleaners and Ealing that smelled of cleaning solvent and had curtains that had given up their original color, and she put up the standard protective wards, made tea from the emergency supplies, and called Moody on a communication mirror she kept in her jacket. "I have him," she said. Moody's eye filled the mirror's surface. The magical one rotated briefly. "How?" He was already in Surrey. He wasn't going for Harry. That's a significant claim. He says Pettigrew framed him. Says Pettigrew was the secret keeper, not him. Says the rat in the newspaper photograph, Scabbers, Moody said. Very quietly. The Weasley boy's rat. If that's Pettigrew, then everything that sent Black to Azkaban was testimony from a dead man who wasn't dead and evidence from a scene with no witnesses. Moody's real eye went very still. Sit on him for 24 hours. Don't file his location. I need to make 2 calls. Am I going to be in trouble? Probably. He looked at her. Does that change anything? No. Then stop asking. He clicked off. She put the mirror away. In the flat small kitchen, Sirius Black was sitting with both hands wrapped around a mug of tea, looking at the steam, and she had the sense of someone watching something come back from a very far distance, not a recovery, not a restoration, but a returning, slow and unsteady, like blood returning to a limb that had been held still too long. She brought her own tea and sat across from him. How much do you know? He asked. About which part? The night they died. He didn't look up from the mug. James and Lily. She chose honesty. What's in the public record, which is less than it should be. And what Remus has written. She watched his face. He's alive. You probably want to know that. Sirius looked up. Something went through his eyes too fast to name. Where? Living rough. He didn't know about Pettigrew any more than anyone did. He thought, she stopped. He thought I did it, Sirius said. Flat. Not accusatory. Just a fact he'd had 12 years to arrive at. Yes. He nodded slowly. When this is sorted, if this is sorted, I need to see him. I know. She turned her mug in her hands. And Harry. And Harry. He said the name quietly. I was his godfather. I should have, he stopped. I went after Peter. That was the wrong call. If I'd gone to Harry first, you couldn't have known Dumbledore would put him where he put him. No. But I could have, he set the mug down. He doesn't know me. He knows of you. She watched his face. I've told him things. Carefully. Things about his parents, about the people who loved them. She paused. I didn't tell him what the official record says about you. He looked at her sharply. I said there were things about the war that weren't resolved, she said. I didn't want him to build a picture I might have to take apart later. A long pause. You were protecting him from being wrong about something. I was protecting him from being hurt by finding out he'd been wrong about something. She met his eyes. There's a difference. He studied her for a long moment, really studied, the way she'd learned Harry studied things, from multiple angles and without hurry. Then, my godson has good taste, he said. She kept her expression neutral with some effort. I'll tell him you said that. Don't tell him anything yet. He picked up the mug again. Let me be worth telling him about first. She looked at him, gaunt and scarred and honest in the raw, undisguised way that 12 years without pretense had either developed or stripped bare, and thought, yes, that's the right instinct. That's James Potter's best friend thinking clearly after 12 years of Dementors. That's someone who knows what he wants to be and is starting from the right place. 48 hours, she said. Then we'll see. The 48 hours became 72 while Moody made his calls, and the 72 became a week while the ministry debated, and the week became 2 weeks of paperwork and political negotiation that aged Tonks about 3 years and gave Moody what she suspected was his first genuine satisfaction from the job in some time. They got a hearing. Not the full trial. The ministry was not about to publicly admit to incarcerating someone for 12 years without one, but a closed hearing, with Veritaserum, with a Wisingamot member who Moody had apparently been holding a specific favor over for several years and chose this moment to call in. She was not in the room. She was outside, in the corridor, with Harry's practice wand in her jacket pocket and her magic pointed north, and she waited. It took 4 hours. Moody came out first. They're not going to exonerate him publicly, he said. Not yet. Too much face to lose. But they're not recapturing him either. And they've opened a formal investigation into Pettigrew's status. He looked at her. He's free. Conditionally. Reports weekly. Doesn't access wizard public spaces without clearance. It's better than it should be and worse than it deserves to be. Can he see Harry? That'll need Dumbledore's sign-off. A pause. Which I've already requested. And which Dumbledore gave. She looked at him. He just gave it. He seemed unsurprised. Moody's magical eye rotated. He also seemed relieved, which I found more interesting. I think he's wanted a reason to revisit that decision for a long time and nobody gave him the paperwork for it until now. He straightened. Go in. He's waiting. Sirius was sitting at the table in the hearing room, and he looked lighter. Not dramatically so, 12 years wasn't something that floated off in an afternoon, but like something had been put down. Something very heavy, carried very long. He looked up when she came in. Conditionally free, he said. Better than not free. By a significant margin, yes. He looked at his hands, which were not shaking, which she suspected was a victory he was quietly cataloguing. You filed the paperwork. All of it. Moody helped. Moody told me what you did. What you risked. He met her eyes. You didn't have to. I already told you why I did. No trial, he said. No trial. He was quiet for a moment. When can I see him? She'd been thinking about this since the moment she'd put her wand away in the street in Surrey. How to manage this, not protect Harry from Sirius, not protect Sirius from Harry, but give them space to be whatever they were going to be without the weight of 12 years of absence crushing the first minute. He knows you're out, she said. I told him yesterday. I didn't tell him everything, I told him enough. That it was complicated, that there was more to the story, that you wanted to meet him. She paused. He asked if you were like his dad. Sirius went still. I said you were exactly like his dad in the ways that mattered and a lot less like him in the ways that didn't. She looked at him. He said that sounded good. Sirius looked at the ceiling briefly. The sharp-witted eyes were doing something complicated. When? He said. Saturday. The Tonks house. Mum's home, you'll want that, trust me, someone to talk to who remembers who you were before. Ted will make pancakes. She stood. Harry knows the house. He's comfortable there. It's better than neutral ground. Better for him, Sirius said. Yes. He nodded. Saturday. Saturday was grey and damp and Ted made an unconscionable amount of food and Andromeda greeted Sirius at the door with the particular composure of a woman who had been composing herself for this moment for 12 years. They looked at each other on the doorstep. Sirius, she said. Andy, he said, and his voice broke on the second syllable in a way that he didn't try to cover, and she stepped forward and put her arms around him, carefully, the way you hold something you thought was gone, and that was that for about 45 seconds. Tonks watched from the hallway. She'd thought she was prepared for this. She was not entirely prepared for this. Ted appeared at her shoulder. Handed her a cup of tea. Looked at the doorstep. Right, he said, quietly. Right. Harry arrived 20 minutes later, alone, which had been his request. He'd told Tonks 2 days ago that he wanted to walk from the end of the road, that he wanted a minute to organize himself, which was the most Harry way she could imagine managing this moment. She watched him come up the path through the kitchen window. Hands in his pockets, head slightly down, the particular quality of someone in the process of being brave without performing it. She met him at the door. He looked up at her. Is he here? Inside. She studied his face. Nervous? A bit. He paused. He'll look different from what I've seen in my head. Yes. That's all right. He straightened slightly. Whoever he is now is the version I'm meeting. I'll work with that. She stared at him. He was 10 years old. When did you get this sorted out about things? You kept saying not to decide about things before I'd seen them. He looked at her with that steady, level look. I listen. She stepped back from the door. He walked in. Sirius was in the sitting room with Andromeda, and he stood when Harry came through the doorway, and for a moment both of them were still, the man looking at the boy like he was counting something, like he was finding something he'd been looking for in all the wrong places for 12 years, and the boy looking at the man like he was doing the thing he always did, which was take a full and honest measurement before deciding anything. You look like James, Sirius said. His voice was steady. She could tell he'd been working on making it steady. I know, Harry said. I've seen photos. He paused. You look like you haven't been sleeping. Sirius blinked. Then, helplessly, laughed. No. Not particularly. For about 12 years. Tonks said Azkaban was, Harry stopped. Bad. That covers it. I'm sorry. He said it simply, without embellishment. The way Harry said important things. Sirius went very still. I know it wasn't your fault, Harry said. Tonks told me enough and I've been thinking about it since she did. You lost them too. And then you lost 12 years on top. He looked at Sirius with those green eyes, Lily's eyes, the eyes that had reorganized a bond 2 years ago. You shouldn't have had to lose all of that. Sirius sat down. It was the kind of sitting down that happens when your legs have made the decision before you have. He put his elbows on his knees and looked at the boy standing in the doorway of Andromeda Tonks's sitting room and said, Your father would have liked you very much. I know, Harry said, and this time it wasn't just acknowledgement. There was warmth in it, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't need to be announced. Tonks says he was an idiot in a good way. She's very generous. He was an idiot in an absolutely spectacular way. He straightened slightly. He also taught himself to transfigure without a wand by 4th year. Your mum said it was the most annoying thing she'd ever seen. Harry's eyes lit. Not dramatically, that steady, concentrated version of attention that was his version of lighting up. Without a wand. Took him 2 years but, how? And that was it. The gate opened. They were off, Sirius talking with the particular energy of someone who has 12 years of stories that nobody has wanted to hear, and Harry listening with the focused intensity of someone who has wanted exactly these stories his whole life, and Tonks leaned in the doorway of the sitting room and watched and felt something settle in the specific way that meant a long incomplete thing had found its shape. Ted appeared at her elbow. Pancakes are ready, he said quietly. Give them 20 more minutes, she said. He considered the room. I'll give them 15. I didn't make this many pancakes for sentiment. She smiled. The month after Sirius's hearing, Harry turned 11. She got him proper books, 4th and 5th year level now, because there was no point pretending otherwise, and a new set of practice materials and a small pocket notebook, which she'd noticed he'd started carrying to write down things he wanted to think about later. Sirius got him a photograph. She knew what it was before Harry showed her. Sirius had told her about it the week before, a photograph from a box Andromeda had been keeping, one from a birthday at Godric's Hollow, July 1981. James and Lily and Harry, 1 year old. James making faces at the camera. Lily laughing at James making faces. Baby Harry laughing at Lily laughing. A family in summer, 3 months before everything ended, none of them knowing. Harry looked at it for a long time. Is this the only one? He asked. Sirius has a few more, she said. He'll give them to you over time. He said. She stopped. What? He said he didn't want to give them all at once because he wanted you to have things to look forward to. Harry looked at the photograph. James was still making faces on a loop, Lily still laughing. He's better at this than I thought he'd be, Harry said. He's had 12 years to think about what he'd do if he got out. Is that what you think kept him sane? She considered. That and stubbornness. He's very stubborn. He told me he got it from your family. Every black was stubborn. Most of them in destructive directions. She sat down beside him on the garden wall, the Tonks house garden, the roses, the familiar September afternoon. Sirius just got lucky about which direction he aimed it. Harry looked at the photograph. Mum looks like she's laughing at something that happens all the time, he said. Like laughing at Dad being an idiot is just what Tuesday is. I think it was. He stopped. Looked for the word. That's a good kind of ordinary. It is. He tucked the photograph carefully into his pocket. Looked up at her. 3 weeks, he said. 3 weeks, she confirmed. The Hogwarts letter. She'd been preparing for this the way she prepared for everything important, not with a plan, exactly, but with a direction. Harry would go. He would arrive knowing more than any first year in living memory. He would arrive knowing who he was, having had someone in his corner since he was 7. He would not arrive afraid. Are you ready? She asked. He thought about it honestly, the way he thought about everything. "I've been reading the curriculum for 2 years," he said. "That's not what I asked." "I know." He looked at the garden. At the rose bush Andromeda was so particular about. At the gnome in the corner, which had inexplicably migrated from Privet Drive to the Tonks garden sometime in the last year, and which none of them had directly addressed. "I'm ready to meet people," he said. "I've been thinking about what it'll be like. Having people my own age who know what I know. Who see the same things. Some of them will," she said. "Some of them won't see any of it and you'll still like them. I know." He was quiet for a moment. "I'm not worried about being sorted wrong." She raised her eyebrows. "Who said anything about, you think about it?" He looked at her sidelong. "I can tell when you're thinking about something you haven't said. You get a specific look. I do not get a, you do. It's very subtle." He was almost smiling. "I'm going to be in Gryffindor." "I know I am." "It doesn't feel like a guess." "How does it feel?" "Like something that's already happened," he said. "Like the hat will just be confirming it." She sat with this. Outside the garden the street was quiet, September afternoon, birds making the kind of noise birds make when autumn is coming but hasn't fully committed. Her magic was at its center, resting, pink hair in the September light. "Tonks," Harry said. "Yeah." "After the letter comes. After Hogwarts. You're still," he stopped. He never struggled with words unless it mattered, and she had learned to wait for the moments when he did, because they were always worth the wait. "I'm still here," she said. He nodded once. The compact, final nod that did the work of something much larger. "I know," he said. "I just wanted to say it." She looked at him, 10 years old, almost 11, sitting on a garden wall in the September afternoon with a photograph of his parents in his pocket and 3 weeks until the letter that would change his life, and he was the steadiest thing she knew. "Hey," she said. He looked up. "I fell into your aunt's petunias," she said. "I'm not going anywhere." The full smile. The real one. It crossed his face like light crossing water, quick and warm and completely unguarded, and her magic did the thing it always did, settled deeper, cleaner, more itself. The gnome in the corner looked at them both with the weary philosophy of a garden ornament that has witnessed too much and has stopped being surprised. The letter came on a Tuesday. Harry was in the back garden at Privet Drive when the owl arrived, 11 owls, because 11 owls descended on Privet Drive simultaneously, which was the thing that happened when someone had been blocking correspondence, and which Tonks had been expecting ever since she'd read the theoretical notes on blood ward interactions with magical address registration. She was already on the street when it happened. She'd felt something through the bond, not distress, not the sharp pull, but something that was almost excitement, the ambient version of anticipation that she'd been feeling from him for 3 weeks building toward this specific moment. She waited on the pavement until she heard Petunia's shriek from inside the house. 5 minutes later the back door opened and Harry came into the garden and picked up the nearest envelope and opened it with the focused calm of someone who already knows what it says but wants to have the physical evidence. He read it. Both sides. Folded it back into the envelope. Looked at the wall. She came over the wall. Still catching the rose trellis, because some things were simply going to be ongoing. He held up the letter. "September 1st, she said. "September 1st, he agreed. She sat on the wall. He stood in front of her, letter in hand, and the morning sun was doing something specific to his glasses and his hair was its characteristic disaster and he was almost exactly her height now, which meant he'd gotten taller in the last 6 months, and he was looking at her with the full weight of his attention, those green eyes that had been her magic's north for 4 years. "Dumbledore thinks," he said, carefully, "that I'll arrive at Hogwarts and things will start happening. Challenges. Dangers." He paused. "He put me with the Dursleys because he needed me somewhere ordinary and humble. So I wouldn't be arrogant. So I'd understand what it was like to be nothing. That's one interpretation of his reasons, she said. I don't think it was wrong, Harry said. I think he was mostly right. He looked at the letter. I'm not arrogant. I'm not, I don't think I'm too much. I know what I know and I know what I don't know and I know the difference between them. No, she said. You're not arrogant. But I'm ready, he said. I'm not the boy Dumbledore planned to find at King's Cross. I'm not going to be wide-eyed and overwhelmed and easy to position. He looked up at her. Is that a problem? She thought about the conversation on Privet Drive with Dumbledore. Perhaps exactly what he needed. The genuine regret in those ancient eyes. I don't think so, she said. I think Dumbledore's gotten older and wiser about some things since he made that plan. Will he try to manage me? He'll try to guide you. There's a difference, and he mostly knows the difference. She met his eyes. And if he doesn't, you'll know. You'll feel the difference. And you'll be there. Not at Hogwarts, she said, because she wouldn't lie to him about the limits. Not in any official capacity. But, she reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small mirror, twin to the one she used for Moody. She held it out. Communication mirror. You say my name and I'll see you. Doesn't matter what time. He took it. Turned it over. It was plain, silver-framed, small enough for a jacket pocket. The bond doesn't have range limits, she said. If something goes very wrong I'll know. But I won't know the details. I'll only know that something's happened. She looked at him. So use the mirror. Don't make me guess. He pocketed it. I'll use the mirror. And eat. I can't monitor your meal schedule from London, so you'll need to manage that yourself. I'll eat. And sleep, Tonks. What? I'm going to be fine, he said. Not bravely, not with the theatrical composure of someone performing confidence. Just, plainly. The statement of someone who has done the assessment and arrived at a conclusion. I've been getting ready for 4 years. I'm ready. She looked at him. The almost smile had become the real smile almost simultaneously these days, which was a thing she'd noticed in the last year. The gap had been closing, the performed caution replaced by something that trusted its own judgment. I know, she said. So stop worrying. I'm not, you're doing the thing, he said. I do not do a thing, you do, he said, and there it was, the grin, the quick warm laugh, not from surprise but from genuine amusement at her, specifically, which was a thing she'd been collecting evidence of for 4 years. September 1st, he said. King's Cross. You'll be there. I'll be there. She stood up on the wall. With food. Don't argue. I wasn't going to. Sirius and Remus are coming too. She'd arranged this 2 weeks ago. There'll be a lot of people at the barrier. Good, he said simply. She went back over the wall. The rose trellis. The inevitable catch and brief struggle. She dropped down on the other side and straightened her jacket and heard him, clearly, on the other side of the wall. Tonks, he said. Yeah. A pause. Thank you. For the 4 years. She stood on the pavement in the Tuesday morning sun with her magic sitting quietly at the center of her and her hair going the particular deep rose that was the shade it had been the morning she'd first come over that wall, and she found she didn't have a response that was adequate, which almost never happened. You can thank me properly, she said, by not dying in there. Reasonable terms, he said. She walked down the pavement. Behind her, on the other side of the wall, she could feel him, warm and steady and pointed in the same direction she was. September 1st. She had 23 days to prepare. She intended to use every single one of them. Chapter 4, The Boy Who Already Knew the Hogwarts Express left at 11. By 10 past 10, Platform 9 3/4 was its usual controlled chaos, trunks and owls and parents saying goodbye in the particular way parents say goodbye when they're trying not to make it obvious they're saying goodbye, and the steam from the engine doing its best to make everything slightly more dramatic than it already was. Harry walked through the barrier at 10:15 with Sirius on his left and Remus on his right and Tonks 3 steps behind, and he stopped on the other side and looked at the scarlet engine and the crowd and the smoke-thick air, and he did not gape or stammer or look overwhelmed. He looked interested. "Compartment first," Sirius said, scanning the crowd with the particular vigilance of someone who'd spent 12 years cataloging threats. He was better than he'd been 2 months ago, the gaunt edges filling out, the movement less careful, the humor coming quicker and sharper. He was still recognizably haunted, but he was also recognizably serious, which Remus had told Tonks privately was more than he'd dared hope for. "Get your trunk stowed. We'll do the goodbyes on the platform." "I know how trains work," Harry said. "I'm aware. I'm experiencing an emotion that requires me to give instructions." Sirius gestured at the train. "Go." Harry looked at Tonks. She jerked her head toward the train. He went, threading through the crowd with the efficiency of someone who'd already mapped the available routes. Remus watched him go. He was still thin, always thin, the kind of thin that wasn't going away, but his eyes had some light back in them, the careful academic warmth she'd been watching return incrementally over the 2 months since he and Sirius had been in the same room for the first time in 12 years. That reunion she hadn't witnessed directly. She'd given them the safe house and 3 days and had come back to find both of them looking wrecked and hollowed out and quietly, fiercely, anchored to each other in the specific way of people who've survived something together and finally stopped pretending they did it alone. "He'll be fine," Remus said. He wasn't quite telling her, he was confirming something he'd been working out himself, watching Harry move through the crowd. "He'll be more than fine," she said. "That's what I'm actually worried about." Remus looked at her sidelong. "Explain." "He's walked into Hogwarts with 4 years of advanced preparation, a godfather who's currently free and invested, a full Auror in his corner, and the temperament of someone who thinks before he acts." She watched the carriage Harry had chosen. "The school is not going to know what to do with him." "The school," Sirius said, reappearing beside them, "is going to love him. The school's teachers are going to have complicated feelings." He glanced at Remus. "Remember when James read ahead of the class?" "James read ahead of the class twice and then used that knowledge exclusively for the purpose of interrupting Slughorn mid-sentence," Remus said. "Harry is not going to do that." "He might," Tonks said. "He would never, he would do it once, strategically, if the teacher was being imprecise or misleading, and he'd do it so neatly that the teacher wouldn't realize they'd been corrected." She folded her arms. "He's done it to Andromeda twice. She considers it the highest compliment." Remus stared at her. Then slowly smiled, the warm, slightly reluctant smile of someone being surprised by delight. The train whistle went. Harry appeared at the window of his chosen compartment on the second carriage. He'd already been joined by a girl with an enormous amount of bushy brown hair, who was talking at considerable speed and had the manner of someone who has been waiting to talk to someone who will actually listen and has found her candidate. Harry was giving her his full attention, which probably meant she'd said something genuinely interesting within the first 30 seconds. "Oh, he'll like her," Remus said immediately. "He's going to find his people," Sirius said, quieter. He was watching Harry with the look she'd seen him practice in the mirror when he thought no one was observing, love and grief and the specific sharp joy of someone whose 12 years of loss is slowly being replaced by actual present moments. He's actually going to find his people. The train began to move. Harry looked at Tonks from the window. She was already looking at him. He held up one hand, not waving exactly, just an acknowledgement, a punctuation mark on 4 years of Tuesday visits and garden walls and donuts and Newt-level textbooks. She held up hers. The train took him around the curve and out of sight. Her magic pulled, briefly, not a distress signal, just the bond adjusting to distance, noting the separation with the mild complaint of something that preferred proximity. She'd felt this once before when she'd done a 2-week undercover assignment in Scotland, and it had settled after the first day into a faint, constant hum that was more reassurance than absence. It settled now. Sirius put his hand on her shoulder briefly. She looked at him. He looked like he was also adjusting to something, in his case 12 years of adjustment, all of it telescoped into this one morning. "Pub," he said. "God, yes," she said. Harry's first letter arrived 4 days later, which was fast enough that she knew he'd written it the night he arrived. "The castle is enormous and I've already mapped 2 floors. The moving staircases are a navigation problem disguised as architecture. I think they have a logic, but it takes more than 4 days to find it. I'm in Gryffindor, same as I told you." The hat tried to argue with me about it. I told it I knew my own mind. It agreed. "My roommates are, Ron Weasley, funny, straightforward, excellent at chess, Neville Longbottom, nervous but genuinely kind, better at herbology than he knows, Dean Thomas and Seamus Finnegan, both fine. Seamus has explosive tendencies that I'm monitoring. Hermione Granger is brilliant and has been reading the same books I have, mostly, which means we can have actual conversations. She's going to be excellent once she stops worrying about being the most prepared person in any given room, which will happen naturally when she realizes being prepared isn't a competition." Quirrell smells strange. Not metaphorically. I mean that there is a specific smell from the back of his head that I can't identify but that I don't like. I'm noting it. The castle food is extraordinary. I've eaten 3 proper meals a day for 4 days. This is apparently what my body was always meant to be doing, and I feel as though I've been running on the wrong fuel for 11 years. Don't worry. I'm fine. Tell Sirius I've learned the 3rd floor corridor is locked and I'm already thinking about why. She read it twice. Then she put it down and looked at the ceiling for a moment. Quirrell smells strange. She wrote back immediately, "Don't go near the 3rd floor corridor without more information." The hat argued, "And you won, I want the full account. Please eat at every meal." "What kind of strange smell?" His reply came 2 days later, "Like something dead that's been covered in cheap perfume. It's worst in defense class. Also, the corridor, there's a trapdoor. I found it by accident. I'm fairly certain Dumbledore put something valuable down there and Quirrell is interested in it. I'm not going in. I'm just watching. The hat told me I could be great in Slytherin. I told it that ambition without judgment was just appetite. It said I was the most difficult first year it had encountered in 40 years. I consider this a success." She wrote back, "Do not go near the trapdoor." Also, that is an incredible thing to say to a hat. The first Quidditch match happened in November. She knew about it from his letter the day before. "I've been made Gryffindor Seeker, which shouldn't be possible in first year, but McGonagall appears to have decided that rules are flexible when talent is obvious enough." And she was in the middle of a ministry briefing on Eastern European dark artifacts when her magic went sharp and cold and wrong in a way that she had not felt since the day Dudley had pushed Harry into a fence post and the Bond had reported it like a bell being struck. She was out of the briefing room in 10 seconds. The mirror. She pulled it out. Harry. His face appeared after a moment, wind-flushed, alive, the particular brightness of someone who has just survived something and is still running on the adrenaline of it. "I'm fine," he said immediately. "What happened?" "Quirrell tried to jinx my broom during the match. Hermione set his robes on fire and Neville actually tackled him. It was extraordinary." He paused. "I caught the snitch in my mouth." I'm fine. The broom is fine. Gryffindor won." He watched her face through the mirror. "The Quirrell situation is accelerating. I think whatever's under the trapdoor is what he's after." She pressed 2 fingers to her forehead. "Harry. I know. I'm watching. I'm not doing anything." He paused. "But Tonks, if Quirrell gets through before the end of the year, whatever's down there is more dangerous in his hands than in a room full of students." "I know that. And Dumbledore will, I'll talk to Dumbledore," she said. "Don't go near that trapdoor." I hear you. That's not a yes. A pause. I'll go near it only if there's no other option, and I'll tell you first. Harry, I'm 11, he said. Not 5. I'm not going to do anything stupid. Going near a trapdoor guarded by Dumbledore's personal defenses is objectively, I know, he said, with the particular patience of someone who is being patient because they've already thought this through. But if Quirrell gets there first and I'm the only one close enough to stop it, he looked at her through the mirror. You didn't teach me all of this so I'd hide in the dormitory. She opened her mouth. Closed it. He was right. She'd told him once, sitting on the garden wall, that knowing what you know and doing nothing with it was its own kind of failure. She'd meant it about knowledge, about thinking, about being honest. He'd apparently applied it more broadly. Tell me before you do anything, she said. I will. Promise. I promise. He looked at her steadily through the mirror. Are you going to talk to Dumbledore? Tonight, she said. He nodded. Okay. A brief pause, and then, quieter, the match was, Tonks, flying is, he stopped, seemed to be looking for something adequate. It's like your magic being comfortable. But for your body. She looked at his face through the mirror, wind-flushed, bright, alive. The feeling in her chest that she'd stopped naming 4 years ago and simply kept. Good, she said. I'm glad. She went to Hogwarts on a Sunday in December. Dumbledore's office was as she'd imagined it, circular, warm, full of objects that were doing things in the periphery that you weren't supposed to look at directly. The sorting hat was on its shelf. The phoenix, Fawkes, regarded her from his perch with the incandescent patience of something immortal watching something temporary. Dumbledore offered tea. She took it. Quirrell, she said. Yes, he said. The trapdoor. Yes. He tried to jinx Harry's broom during a Quidditch match. She set the teacup down. In front of 300 students and at least 4 faculty. He was not successful, Dumbledore said. He will be, if we wait long enough. She met the blue eyes. What's down there? What's he after? A pause. The Philosopher's Stone, he said. Nicholas Flamels. I moved it here in September. She thought about the implications of this. The sequence of it, the stone arriving, Quirrell's interest intensifying, the attempted theft foiled by Gryffindor students setting robes on fire. Someone's working through Quirrell, she said. Yes. Something that would want the stone. Yes. She looked at him. He was looking back, and in the blue eyes was something that she'd seen twice before in this face, the genuine regret, the awareness of a plan meeting the reality of a person. You expected him to go after it, she said. You wanted it accessible. You wanted to see what came for it. I wanted to know, he said quietly, whether certain things I believed about the state of certain enemies were correct. You used the stone as bait. I used the school's protections as a test, he said. And I designed them with care, and I believed that no student would be in any position to encounter them, because no student would have reason to go near the corridor. She waited. I had not, he said, accounted for Harry. No, she said. You hadn't. He stood, moved to the window. Outside Hogwarts the November sky was white and the grounds were frost pale, and she could feel Harry, distantly, at the warm hum the bond maintained at distance. Somewhere in the castle. Safe. He wrote to you about the smell, Dumbledore said. He did. He identified it before I could confirm his suspicions. He clasped his hands behind his back. You know what the smell indicates. The conclusion he drew. Yes. She picked up her tea. He thinks Quirrell is hosting something. That whatever is on the back of his head is the source of both the smell and the interest in the stone. He is correct. Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. He is 11 years old and he arrived at this conclusion by December of his first year. He's been preparing for 4 years, she said. You gave him the time he needed. I know you didn't plan it, but you gave him 4 years in which nobody was making him into anything. And he filled them himself. She set the cup down. The question isn't whether he knows too much. The question is whether you're going to let him be part of the solution or whether you're going to manage him around it. Dumbledore turned from the window. I'm not asking you to send him after Quirrell, she said. I'm asking you to tell him what's happening. Clearly. Without positioning it as a test or a story or a thing he needs to discover for himself. She met those ancient eyes. He deserves the truth about what's in his own school. Silence. Yes, Dumbledore said. He does. He called Harry to the office that evening. She was not in the room, that was right, that conversation belonged to the two of them, but she was in the corridor and she felt through the bond when it happened, when whatever Dumbledore said landed, because the bond went sharp and focused and then, after several long minutes, warm. Harry came out 45 minutes later. He stood in the corridor and looked at her. He told me everything, he said. Good. He also told me who Quirrell is hosting. He paused. Voldemort. She held still. Waited. He's not fully corporeal, Harry said. He's a parasite. He needs the stone to restore himself. He said it with the clean flatness of someone who has taken something very large and is processing it by keeping his voice level. He's the one who killed my parents. Yes. I know that. He looked at his hands. I've known about him for years. It's still, he stopped. Different, when it's in front of you. Yeah, she said. It is. He looked up. I'm not going near the trapdoor. Not unless there's no other option. He met her eyes. Dumbledore has a plan. Do you trust it? He thought about this honestly. I trust that it's better than no plan. I trust that he's taking it seriously. He paused. I don't fully trust that his plan accounts for all the variables. So you're keeping your own counsel. I'm being aware, he said. There's a difference. She looked at him in the dim corridor, 11 years old with the weight of Voldemort's name in his mouth and those green eyes steady and clear, and she thought, there it is. There's the person he was going to be. Okay, she said. Come on. McGonagall says there's food in the Great Hall until 9. I know. I was there at dinner. Come and have second dinner with me. Dumbledore's already approved my overnight pass. She started down the corridor. I want to hear about the hat argument. The full account, not the letter version. The hat was very argumentative. I believe you. It made several points about my aptitude for strategy, I believe those too. Tell me anyway. They walked down the moving staircase together in the Hogwarts evening, and the bond was warm at its center, and her hair was pink, and somewhere in the foundations of the castle something very dangerous was waiting, and it would keep for tonight. Quirrell made his move on a Tuesday in June. Harry felt it before the alarm, which was what she'd warned him would happen, not because she told him specifically but because she trained him to trust his own sense of when things were wrong, and the castle felt wrong at 2 in the morning in a very specific way. He got Hermione and Ron out of bed. He explained, concisely, what he knew. He told them what they were going to do. Hermione argued one point, which he listened to, incorporated, and redirected in 30 seconds. Ron looked at him with the expression he'd come to wear in these moments, the one that said I don't know why I keep being surprised by you, and then said, right. Let's go then. He told them everything at the trapdoor. No heroic omissions, no protecting them from information they needed. Hermione solved the plant, Ron played the chess game, magnificently, from the account Harry gave her afterward, the kind of chess move that used himself as the sacrificial piece before Harry could stop him, and Harry walked through the final door alone. The mirror. He'd known about the mirror of Erist. Dumbledore had told him, in the December meeting, what the final protection was. Not how to use it, but Harry had spent 6 months thinking about the logic of it, and he understood the logic, and he understood something else that the mirror's designer had perhaps not fully considered, that a person who has genuinely found something worth protecting, something they love in the present tense rather than the future conditional, sees themselves in the mirror holding that thing not because they want it but because they already have it. Quirrell was already there. The stone was not yet in his hands. Harry looked at the mirror. He saw himself. Standing in the garden of the Tonks house, in the September afternoon, with the practice wand glowing in his hand and the feeling in his chest that he'd spent 7 years learning to trust. He saw Sirius at the table, and Remus reading in the corner, and Ted making pancakes, and Andromeda looking at him with the table of contents look. He saw 4 years of Tuesdays. He saw donuts and garden walls and a girl with pink hair falling into petunias. He felt the stone drop into his pocket. The mirror had given it to him because he wanted to find it and not use it. Because what he already had was so clearly the thing he actually wanted that the enchantment had no resistance to work against. Quirrell turned from the mirror, suspicious, and saw Harry's face, and said, "Where is it?" "What do you see?" "Myself," Harry said. "Shaking your hand. After we've come to an arrangement." Quirrell stared at him. "What arrangement?" "You don't need the stone," Harry said. He kept his voice even, conversational. "Voldemort needs the stone. You need to survive this year and get out from under something that's using you as a host." He could see the wound on the back of the turban, the wrongness of it, the dark magic bleeding through the cloth. "I'm offering you a way out." "He'll kill me," Quirrell said. "He'll definitely kill you when he's done with you. That's what parasites do to their hosts." Harry looked at him properly, the way Tonks had taught him to look at people, fully and honestly. What he saw was a man who had made a terrible decision and had been paying for it since with his body and his sanity. "I'm not your enemy." "He is." "I can't," Quirrell's hands shook. The voice from the back of the turban was something colder than a voice should be. "I can't resist, I know," Harry said. "So I'm going to do something, and it's going to hurt you, and I'm sorry for that, but it's the only way to give you a chance to choose." He reached into his pocket. His fingers closed on the stone. And then he held out his other hand, his empty hand, and said, "Grab hold. And hold tight." Quirrell reached out, compelled by something he didn't fully understand, and the moment his fingers closed on Harry's wrist the contact happened. He'd asked Dumbledore about his mother's sacrifice. He'd asked about the protection it had left, what it actually meant in practical terms. Dumbledore had explained it as love made into magical matter, a barrier that responded to malicious intent. Harry had thought about this for 6 months and had concluded that the barrier wasn't passive. He was right. Quirrell screamed. The turban unwound. The face on the back of Quirrell's head, cadaverous, red-eyed, the remnant of something that had once been Tom Riddle and had remade itself in darkness, looked at Harry with the recognition of something encountering itself. "Interesting," Voldemort said. His voice came from a face with no working lungs, which made it both impossible and deeply unwelcome. "You're not afraid." "I've been expecting you," Harry said. "Indeed." The red eyes looked at his hand, still holding Quirrell's wrist. Quirrell was nearly unconscious, the contact burning through him. "The stone." "Not for you," Harry said. "I will kill your mother's sister. Your fat uncle. The old man who keeps the dog. The woman with the pink." "No," Harry said, pleasantly, "you won't. Because you're about to not be a face on the back of someone's head anymore, and that's going to limit your options considerably." He pressed his palm flat against Quirrell's face. The sound that followed was not a battle. It wasn't an exchange of spells or a contest of power. It was the sound of Lily Potter's sacrifice meeting the thing that had made it necessary, and it was brief and absolute and left Quirrell crumpled on the floor and the stone chamber empty of anything that had previously been calling itself Voldemort. Harry stood in the chamber for a moment. The stone was in his pocket. Quirrell was breathing, unconscious but alive, which was more than could be said for the entity that had been riding him. He pulled out the mirror. Tonks. She appeared in the mirror within 2 seconds, which meant she'd been awake and waiting. Her hair was its default pink and her eyes were sharp and awake and fixed on him. "I'm fine," he said. "Quirrell's down. The stone is safe. Voldemort's," he paused. "He ran. He's not gone, but he's not here." He looked at his hand. "I need Dumbledore." "He's already coming," she said. He felt the disturbance. She looked at his face through the mirror, running the quick assessment he'd seen her run on people in crisis. "Are you hurt?" "No. Physically, I'm fine," he said. "Tonks." "What?" "The mirror, I saw it. In the mirror of Eriste." He paused. "I saw the garden. The September afternoon." He met her eyes through the glass. "That's what I saw when I looked. That's what it gave me." She didn't say anything for a moment. Her magic was at the center of her, feeling it, feeling him, through the bond, 11 years old and standing in a stone chamber after facing the thing that had killed his parents, steady and clear and present. "I know," she said quietly. "I thought you should know that I know what that means," he said. "For the mirror to show that. It means that's what I want most. That's what matters most to me." A pause. The bond was very still. "The September afternoon," she said. "The people in it," he said. She pressed 2 fingers to her mouth briefly. "Took them down. Go meet Dumbledore," she said. "And eat something when you get back to the dormitory. I mean it." He smiled, the real one, unguarded, in the underground chamber with Quirrell on the floor and the remnant of Voldemort fled and the stone in his pocket. "I'll eat. I'll be at Hogwarts on Saturday," she said. "I'll bring food in case you haven't been eating." "I've been eating. I'll bring food anyway." "Okay," he said. The compact final word doing the work of something much larger. He put the mirror away. He spent 3 days in the hospital wing. Madame Pomfrey's official reason was magical exhaustion from contact with cursed artifact, which was accurate in the narrow literal sense and comprehensive in the practical sense. She was a woman who knew which questions not to ask. Hermione visited twice a day and brought books. Ron visited 3 times a day and brought chess problems. Neville came once, sat in the chair beside the bed for an hour, and said almost nothing, which was more comforting than most of the words anyone else offered and which Harry told him so, which made Neville's ears go red and his posture improve simultaneously. Dumbledore came on the 2nd day. He sat at the end of the bed with his hands folded and looked at Harry with those ancient eyes, and he said, "You handled it." "Yes." "You kept the stone safe." "Yes." "You gave Quirrell a choice before you acted against Voldemort." He paused. "Not many would have thought to." "It was the right thing to do," Harry said simply. "He was being used. That doesn't mean I trust him, but it means he deserved the option." Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. "You are," he said, "not who I expected to find." "I know," Harry said. "Is that a problem?" "No." And the regret in those eyes was genuine and complex, and Harry looked at it without flinching, the way he looked at everything. "It is, I think, considerably better than what I expected." He paused. "Nymphadora has done something remarkable. She fell into some petunias," Harry said. "And didn't leave. That's what she did." He met Dumbledore's eyes. The remarkable part was not leaving. Dumbledore looked at him for a long time. "Yes," he said. "I suppose it was. She came on Saturday with an enormous amount of food from a deli in London that she'd clearly spent time choosing, and they sat in the hospital wing while Madame Pomfrey pretended not to notice the outside food and ate and talked about everything except the underground chamber, and then talked about the underground chamber when Harry was ready, which was after the 2nd sandwich. He told her everything. Not the abbreviated mirror version, not the letter version, the whole account, starting with getting Hermione and Ron up at 2 in the morning and ending with Quirrell on the floor and the remnant of Voldemort displaced into something without form or body. She listened without interrupting. She'd gotten better at this over 4 years, or maybe she'd always been good at it and he'd been the one who needed to learn to trust the silence. "The chess," she said, when he'd finished. "Ron played brilliantly," Harry said. "I'll never fully forgive myself for not stopping him from sacrificing himself. He's all right, Pomfrey fixed him in a day, but I should have, you gave him the information and respected his decision," she said. "That's all you can do." It felt wrong. Of course it did. It'll always feel wrong when someone you care about is hurt. That's not a failure of planning. That's the cost of having people you care about. She ate a crisp. The mirror. He met her eyes. "You said you saw the garden," she said. "The September afternoon." He was steady about it, the way he was steady about everything important. "With everyone there. You, and Sirius, and Remus, and Ted and Andromeda." He looked at his hands. "It's not just you. I know you know that. The bond, it's yours, not mine. But what I have, is yours," she said. He looked up. "It goes both ways," she said. "I don't know exactly what it is and I stopped needing to know that a while ago. But," she held his gaze. "I know that what I have in this direction is mine and what you have in this direction is yours and that they're not the same thing but they're not unrelated either." He was quiet for a moment. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said. They ate the rest of the food in comfortable silence, and outside the hospital wing windows Hogwarts was green and June and the year was nearly over, and in the quiet of his chest the mirror of what he'd seen in the underground chamber was still there, clear and unhurried. The September afternoon. Whoever was in it. The train home was crowded and loud and smelled of chocolate frogs and someone's persistent dung bomb accident 3 carriages down. Hermione hugged him at King's Cross with the fierce efficiency of someone who has decided that hugging is practical. Ron shook his hand, then clearly reconsidered and hugged him too, which surprised both of them. Neville waved from behind his grandmother with the expression of someone cataloguing details to examine later. Sirius and Remus were waiting at the barrier. Sirius looked at him for a moment, took his full measure the way Harry took the measure of everything, and then said, "You were brilliant. You heard? Dumbledore sent word." Sirius folded his arms. "He also said, and I'm quoting, your godson gave Quirinus Quirrell a dignified choice before disabling him, which is more than most adults would have managed. He seemed very pleased." "He seemed like someone revising an opinion," Remus said mildly. "Those two things," Harry said, "aren't mutually exclusive." Remus smiled the warm reluctant smile. "No. They're not." Tonks appeared through the barrier crowd, slightly late because the crowd was thick and she'd been stopped by someone who'd recognized her Auror badge and wanted a word. She came through the gap in the stream of families and found them and looked at Harry, and Harry looked at her, and the bond was warm and present and they'd already said everything that needed saying through the mirror in the underground chamber. "Good year?" she said. "Eventful," he said. "I heard you told Voldemort his options were limited." "I did. While you were standing on a stone floor with a crumpled defense teacher at your feet." "That's accurate." She shook her head. Her hair was the deep rose shade it went when she was feeling something she was choosing not to fully perform. 12 years, she said. "And you do in one the thing I've been preparing for since, 4 years, he said. "You've been preparing for 4 years. "I know." He looked at her. "I was ready because of the 4 years. Harry, I mean it." He said it simply, the way he said important things. Everything in that chamber, the logic of the mirror, understanding what Voldemort needed and why, knowing how to talk to someone being used instead of just fighting them, that's 4 years of Tuesdays. He paused. "And the mirror itself." He looked at her. "It showed me what I actually have. Not what I've lost, not what I want that I don't have. What I actually have." He looked at Sirius and Remus, and the station around them, and back at her. That's the 4 years. She was quiet. So, he said. Good year. She let out a breath that was more laugh than sigh. Good year, she said. Sirius pulled Harry into a hug that was brief and fierce and slightly awkward in the way of people who are still learning each other's dimensions but are committed to the process. Remus put a hand on his shoulder with the warmth of someone who has been holding off on this for too long. They walked out of King's Cross into the London afternoon, the 5 of them, into noise and summer heat and the particular chaos of a railway terminus, and Harry walked in the middle of it with his trunk and his owl and 4 years of preparation and the mirror's knowledge of what he already had, and none of them talked about Voldemort or the stone or the year's complications, because there was food somewhere in Remus's consideration and Sirius was already arguing with Ted Tonks over the phone about what kind of pancakes were appropriate for a summer homecoming. The afternoon was warm. The bond was quiet. The year was done. Chapter 5, What the Bond Costs. The Dementors arrived at Hogwarts in September. Not dramatically, they didn't sweep down from the sky or announce themselves with thunder. They were simply there one morning, stationed at the gates like they'd always been, grey and hooded and wrong in the way that things are wrong when they exist in a space they were never meant to occupy. Harry saw them from the train window as it slowed toward Hogsmeade Station, and the bond went cold. Not the warm pull of proximity. Not the sharp signal of danger. Something else entirely, a hollow, drawn-out cold that she felt in her London flat at 11 at night, like the central heating had stopped working, except the central heating was fine, and what had actually stopped was the settled warmth she'd been carrying in the center of her chest for 6 years. She was on the phone with Sirius before she'd consciously decided to call. The Dementors are at Hogwarts, she said. I know. Fudge's idea. Because of me. His voice was flat and controlled in the way it went when he was furious and managing it deliberately. I've been talking to Dumbledore. He was opposed. He lost. Harry's on the train right now and the bond just went. She sat down. It went cold, Sirius. Not emergency cold, but Dementors affect people differently depending on what they have to lose, Sirius said. People with the most, the ones who've suffered most, or who carry the most grief, they feel it worse. A pause. James and Lily. She pressed her hand against the wall. He'll feel them and hear her. He'll hear Lily. Yes. He doesn't know that yet. He's never been near one. I know. They were both quiet for a moment with the specific silence of people who understand a problem and can't fix it from where they're standing. Lupin's on the train, she said. He'll handle it. He will. Sirius paused. Does Harry have the mirror? Always. Then we wait. She waited. She sat on the floor of her flat with her back against the wall and her magic doing something she'd never experienced before, shifting without her direction, not into another form but between states, like it couldn't decide on a temperature. Like something at her center was uncertain for the first time in 6 years. The mirror warmed in her pocket at 11:30. She had it out before the warmth fully registered. Harry. He was pale. Not panicked, Harry didn't panic, had never panicked, but he was pale in the way that meant something had reached past his defenses and touched something real. His voice was steady. Did you feel it? The cold. Yes. I heard her, he said. My mother. Screaming. He said it flatly, which was how he processed things that had hit him hard enough to need processing. The flat voice was not distance, it was the opposite of distance. It was him standing very close to something and describing it precisely. Lupin was there. He did something with chocolate and it helped. Remus knows Dementors, she said. He's had his own encounters. I know. He was quiet for a moment. I wasn't afraid of them, exactly. It was more like, he searched. Like being pulled toward something you don't want to go toward. Like gravity in the wrong direction. That's exactly what it is. The bond went cold, he said. I felt it go cold. I could tell it was coming from your end, not mine. She looked at the wall. The bond mirrors what I feel, she said. When I feel something strongly enough. Apparently it mirrors this. Does that? He stopped. Are you all right? She looked at her own hands. They were her hands, her default, the ones that had been her hands for 6 years now, and they were entirely steady. The cold had settled somewhat. I'm all right, she said. It was just, unexpected. I didn't know that was possible. Tonks. He waited until she looked at the mirror. I need to learn the Patronus. I know. Lupin said he'd teach me. I'm going to tell him about the happy memory. He paused. The garden. September. All of it. Good, she said. I wanted you to know. I know. She looked at his face through the mirror, pale and steady and honest, the same face it always was. Eat your chocolate. Remus will make you carry it everywhere if you don't voluntarily demonstrate you're taking it seriously. I know. He already gave me 3 pieces. That's love, she said. From Remus, 3 pieces of chocolate is a declaration. The ghost of a smile. I'll see you at the first Hogsmeade weekend. I'll be at the 3 broomsticks. Don't be late. I'm never late. You were 11 minutes late in May. There were circumstances. There are always circumstances with you. She was smiling now, the cold receding from her center, the warmth returning in the specific way it returned, not all at once, but like a room warming from a fire, the edges first and then the middle. Go eat dinner. Tell Hermione you're fine before she interrogates 3 separate professors. She's already interrogated 1. Then tell her before she makes it 4. He almost smiled. Put the mirror away. She stayed on the floor for a while after. Her magic was settling, the uncertain temperature resolving back into its usual resting state. But the cold had been real and she knew now that the bond worked in both directions in ways she hadn't fully mapped, and that the Dementors were at Hogwarts for the whole year, and that her magic was going to feel that cold every time one got close to him. She got up. Made tea. Pulled out her notebook. At the bottom of the current page she wrote, the bond doesn't just mirror comfort. It mirrors cost. She looked at it for a moment. Then underneath, worth it. Obviously. Remus taught Harry the Patronus in October. She knew because Harry told her, and because Remus wrote her a separate letter that arrived the same morning, in his careful academic handwriting, which said, he produced a full corporeal Patronus on the 4th attempt. The form is a stag. I thought you should know, because I'm not certain anyone has told him clearly enough what that means, that his father's Animagus form chose him. Please do. He'll hear it better from you. She went to Hogsmeade on the first weekend in November. Harry was already at the 3 broomsticks when she arrived, which meant he'd been early, which meant he'd wanted the 5 minutes before she arrived to settle himself, which was a thing she'd watched him do for years when something mattered. She sat down across from him. Butterbeer. Steam. The usual Saturday morning crowd of students doing their best to look like they weren't watching Harry Potter. Remus told me about the Patronus, she said. I figured he would. Harry turned his butterbeer in his hands. A stag. Your dad. His Animagus form. He looked at the table. I know what it means. That's not, he stopped. It was the memory that did it. The September afternoon. And I was trying to find the center of it, the part that was most real, and it was, he paused. It was the moment you gave me the donuts. The first day. He looked up. You didn't say here, have these or you look hungry, you just made up a reason and handed them over in a way that gave me room to take them without it being charity. He met her eyes. I didn't know that was a thing people could do for each other until you did it. So that was the memory. That specific moment. She did not do anything embarrassing. She was a trained Auror with 6 years of composure practice. She picked up her butterbeer and drank some. Good memory, she said. He produced it on the 4th try, Harry said, in a voice that meant, I know you're not going to make a thing of this, so neither will I. Lupin said it was fast. 4th try is extremely fast. Most people take months. It helped that I understood the theory first. He looked at the Patronus charms movement in his memory. She could tell from the way his eyes went slightly inward, the look he got when he was revisiting something. The stag surprised me. I'd been expecting something else. What else? He looked at her. Didn't answer. She looked back. Then she understood what he hadn't said, and the bond did something quiet and warm at its center, and she picked up her butterbeer again and said, Tell me about how Lupin's doing. Properly. He's good, Harry said, with the particular emphasis of good meaning something more than adequate. He's the best defense teacher I've had, which isn't difficult given Quirrell, but he's also just, genuinely good at it. He makes it sensible. He paused. He looks tired sometimes. I know about the condition. He told me because I asked directly and he decided I deserved a straight answer. He told you. I told him I'd already worked it out and would he rather explain it himself or let me go on with incomplete information. He chose to explain it himself. A slight smile. He said I had my father's directness without his father's flair. Remus gives compliments the way other people give tax returns, Tonks said. Dense, slightly painful, but accurate. Harry laughed, short, genuine, the real one. The bond was warm. The problem started in January. Not the Dementors themselves, she'd adjusted to the cold that came through the bond when they were near him, had learned to distinguish the brief sharp cold of proximity from the longer drawn-out cold that meant something more sustained. She kept the mirror close and slept lighter on the bad nights and filed the discomfort as part of the arrangement. The problem was that her control started going. She noticed it first in a surveillance operation in mid-January, holding a cover identity, standard work, a form she'd maintained a dozen times. She was 3 hours into it when the form slipped. Not dramatically. Not a full shift. Just the cheekbones softening back toward her own, the hair going slightly pink before she caught it, corrected, pushed it back. She held the cover identity for the remaining 4 hours with the effort it had previously taken to hold one for 12, and came back to the office with sweat at the back of her neck and a very specific suspicion that she spent 3 days confirming before she told anyone. She told Moody. He looked at her across the desk. The magical eye rotated once, twice. How long, he said. 3 weeks since I first noticed. I think it started around January's start. She kept her voice clinical. The Dementors at Hogwarts began having regular, extended contact with Harry in September. My theory, your theory is that the bond is conducting, Moody said. Yes. His repeated Dementor exposure is affecting his access to the core memory, the one the bond is anchored to. If that memory becomes less accessible under stress, the bond's anchor loosens, Moody said. And the form it holds becomes unstable. She looked at her hands. I'm still fully functional in my own form. Every shift I make deliberately is clean. It's only the sustained holds that are giving me trouble. How much trouble? 4 hours today instead of 12. Last week, 6. The week before, 8. She met his eyes. It's gradual. But it's consistent. Moody was quiet for a long time. She waited. That was what you did with Moody, you let the silence be what it was, which was thinking rather than absence. Can it reverse, he said. If the Dementor exposure decreases, theoretically yes. But there are Dementors at Hogwarts for the full year, and Harry won't, he's not going to avoid them, and even if he did, the damage done is already done, Moody said. Not damage, she said. Disruption. There's a difference. He looked at her. You're sure? She paused. She was making a distinction that mattered to her personally and she knew it, and Moody would know it too. "I'm managing it," she said. "I'm adapting the technique. Shorter holds, more regular resets, different approach to sustained forms." She straightened. "I'm not asking for assignment modification. I'm informing you, because that's what I should do. And because you want someone else to know," he said, in the tone he used when he was being specifically acute. "And because I want someone else to know," she admitted. He nodded once. "If it gets worse, I want to know before it becomes a problem in the field." "Agreed. And you're going to tell Harry?" She looked at the desk. "I don't want to tell him," Moody said. "He needs to know. Not because he'll feel guilty, though he will, because he's him, but because he deserves to understand what's happening in something that involves his own magic." He looked at her steadily. "You've been honest with him about everything else." She knew he was right. She'd known it since the first day in January when she'd felt the slip and understood what it meant. She'd been delaying for the same reason she'd been carrying Dittany in her jacket for 6 years, because she'd rather take the hit than explain it. "I'll tell him at the next Hogsmeade weekend," she said. "Good." He stood. "You're still the best we have at covers, slipping or not. That doesn't change." "I know that," she said. "Then stop looking like someone who thinks it might." She straightened. "I don't look like you do. Same look you had when you got the badge. Like you're waiting for someone to point out an error." He moved toward the door. "Nobody's pointing out an error. Tell the boy. Figure out the solution together. That's what the thing's for." He left. She sat at her desk. Her hair was pink. Her hands were her hands. The bond was warm and distant and slightly cold at the edges in the specific way of January in Hogwarts. She pulled out the mirror. Not to call, just to hold. She told him at the Three Broomsticks in February, at the same table, with the same butterbeers, in the straightforward manner she'd used for everything she'd ever told him because it was the only manner she knew that didn't involve treating him like someone who needed protecting from facts. He listened to the whole thing without interrupting. "The slippage is gradual," she said, finishing. "Moody knows. I'm adapting the technique. It's not a crisis." She met his eyes. "But I wanted you to know." He was quiet. "Harry, don't tell me not to feel responsible," he said. "I wasn't going to." He looked at her. "You were about to give me the version where this is the bond working as intended and not a cost you're paying because of my Dementor exposure." She held his gaze. "Yes. Because both of those things are true at the same time." "I know they are." He looked at the table. "Is there something I can do?" "Keep doing the Patronus work with Remus. The more robust your access to the core memory, the more stable the anchor," he said. "Right." He was quiet for a moment. She waited, because he was thinking and the thinking was what mattered and it was worth waiting for. "The core memory," he said. "The donuts." "Yes. What makes it the anchor specifically?" "Not just a happy memory, you've said I have many. What makes that one the bond's reference point?" She'd thought about this. She'd thought about it for 6 years, in the way you think about things that are fundamental and don't have tidy explanations. "I think," she paused. "I think it was the first time you'd been given something with no expectation attached. No trade. No condition." She looked at him. "Most of what you'd been given at the Dursleys had a condition. Chores, performance, behavior. The donuts had nothing. I just handed them over." She paused. "And you laughed. Before you even took one. Because of Dudley's nose." She smiled, briefly. "I think the magic understood, my magic understood, that you laughing like that was what a protected, loved child sounded like. And it had been waiting for that for 6 years." Harry looked at her for a long time. The bond was still and warm at its center in a way that sometimes happened when something was being said that needed saying. Okay, he said. I'm going to do the Patronus work every day. Not just with Remus. I'll do the independent work. He straightened. And if it gets worse, I'll tell you. Before it becomes a problem, not after. Yes, she said. He looked at her steadily. Tonks. What? Thank you for telling me. She looked at him across the table, 13 years old, with the gravity of someone twice that and the warmth of someone who had learned that warmth was worth the risk, and she said, of course. Not of course, he said. You could have managed it quietly. You managed Quirrell quietly for months. That was different. How? She thought about it honestly. That was about protecting you from a threat. This is about, she paused. This is about telling you the truth about something that's yours as much as mine. She met his eyes. You're right. It's not of course. It's a choice. She looked at the butterbeer. I choose to tell you things. I know, he said. I've known that for 6 years. He picked up his drink. Now tell me what Sirius wrote that made you laugh on Thursday. I could feel you laughing from here. She stared at him. You can't feel, you told me the bond is bilateral. You said it mirrors things. He looked at her with those green eyes. Thursday evening I felt warm in a way that wasn't related to anything happening here. Like something funny was happening somewhere. She pressed her lips together to stop the smile. He wrote about the time your dad transfigured Snape's textbook into a rather detailed anatomy of a flobberworm during 6th year and Snape didn't notice until chapter 4. Harry's laugh filled the 3 broomsticks, warm and real and completely unguarded, and 3 tables of students looked over instinctively and then tried to pretend they hadn't. Her hair went the deep rose shade it went for that sound specifically. The bond was warm. The slippage could be managed. Peter Pettigrew was found in March. Not by her, not by Moody, not by the Ministry's formal investigation that had been grinding along since October. He was found by a large black dog that had been increasingly difficult to keep out of Hogwarts grounds, and a werewolf who happened to be in the right corridor at the right time, and 3 13-year-olds who had been significantly more prepared for this moment than anyone had anticipated. She found out at midnight on a Thursday when the mirror warmed in her hand, and she sat up with her heart already moving fast before she'd registered the signal, and Harry's voice came through low and urgent and controlled. Pettigrew's here, he said. We've got him. Remus and Sirius cornered him in the shrieking shack. He's confirmed everything, your mum was right about the trial, Sirius is fully exonerated, it's all, he stopped. It was Ron's rat. All year. Peter was Ron's rat. She pressed her free hand over her eyes. Ron's all right, Harry said quickly. His leg's broken from earlier, long story involving the Whomping Willow, which I'll tell you separately, but he's all right. Another pause. Tonks. The moon. She looked at the window. Full. Completely full. Remus didn't take his potion, she said. He forgot. Pettigrew's reveal, in the chaos, he forgot. He's going to turn and when he does Pettigrew will run. Harry's voice was steady but there was a thread of something underneath it. I can't stop Remus from turning. I can cast a Patronus when he does to push the Dementors back. But if Pettigrew gets away, he'll get away, she said. Harry, I know. The thread underneath was not fear. It was grief, the specific clean grief of someone who has already arrived at a conclusion they didn't want to arrive at. I know he'll probably run. I know I can't prevent everything. He paused. I just needed to tell someone. I know, she said. I know you did. Tell Sirius, he stopped. Tell him I know it might go wrong tonight and it's not his fault. Tell him yourself, she said. When it's over. He needs to hear it from you. A beat. Yeah. Okay. The controlled voice again, with the thread underneath it that was his version of afraid not for himself but for the people around him. I'm going to go. The moon's at its highest. Be careful. I will. Harry. Yeah. You've got the Patronus, she said. Whatever happens out there, you've got the Patronus. It'll hold. A pause. I know what memory I'm using, he said. Good. Use it. She sat in her flat after the mirror went dark with her magic shifting between temperatures and her hair changing without her direction, not to any specific form, just cycling through shades, rose to amber to something deep and uncertain and back to rose, and she recognized this as the bond conducting again but differently, the form uncertainty bleeding through from the bond's disrupted anchor into her ambient shifts, and she watched her own hands change shade in the dark and thought, this is what love costs. Not the dramatic version. The version where you sit in the dark and wait. She waited. It went wrong, as these things go wrong. Pettigrew escaped, his finger on the floor and his body gone, the same trick he'd pulled 12 years ago. Sirius was captured by the Dementors after the transformation and taken to Hogwarts, and Harry and Hermione were locked in the hospital wing, and when the mirror warmed again at 3 in the morning Harry's voice was flat with the specific flatness of someone recounting something they needed to metabolize. He's gone, Harry said. Peter. I tried. I cast the Patronus, it held, it pushed the Dementors back, it held through 6 of them, but then Sirius transformed in the confusion. It's not your fault, she said. I know that, he said quietly. But Sirius is in the castle. They're going to give him the kiss. The flat voice cracked, briefly, on the last word, then sealed itself back. Dumbledore came to the hospital wing. He said something to me and Hermione. He said, he stopped. She waited. He said there are ways to turn this back, Harry said slowly. He said some things can be revised if approached correctly. He paused. He said that more than one innocent life has been at stake tonight. She understood immediately. Buckbeak, she said. Yes. His voice was thinking fast now, the deliberate flatness replaced by the focused attention she knew best. He's not saying anything, she said. He would never say anything directly. He's indicating. She pressed her hand flat on the bedspread. Harry. I know. This is very high risk and theoretically straightforward and Hermione has a time turner, he said. She went completely still. She's had it all year, Harry said. For the extra lessons. 3 turns takes us back 3 hours. We can, he paused. We can revise this. She thought about it rapidly, the theory, the limits, the risks, the specific rules about interfering with your own timeline, and said, you need to be gone before your past self see you. You need to get Buckbeak free before the execution. And you need to get Sirius off the tower. She paused. And you cannot be seen. I know all of this. If Dumbledore sent you back, he indicated, Harry said. He didn't send us back. That's the distinction. His voice was careful. Whatever happens in the next few hours, it happened because we chose it. A pause. I wanted you to know we're going. Harry, I'll tell you after, he said. I'll use the mirror when we're back. She made a decision. Take the mirror, she said. Don't call me, you can't make noise, but if something goes critically wrong you show me your face and I'll know. Okay. And Harry. She stopped. Yeah. Be kind to the past version of yourself, she said. He's going to be confused. A brief, surprised pause. Then, he almost laughed. That's very specific advice. I know you, she said. You'll see yourself and want to fix everything he's feeling. You can't. Just get serious and get out. Okay, he said. The mirror went dark. She sat in the dark for 2 more hours with her magic shifting and her hair cycling through shades and the bond running cold and the specific rhythm of Harry moving through something dangerous and managing it, which she recognized by now the way you recognize a heartbeat. Then the bond went warm. Steady. Clear. Sirius's escape was in the Prophet 2 days later. Convicted murderer vanishes from Hogwarts Tower, with a ministry statement that managed to be both furious and vague, which was the ministry's specialty. The story that emerged was incomplete and contradictory, which was also the ministry's specialty. Harry's mirror call came on the Saturday. He was sitting in the Gryffindor common room with the controlled flat voice replaced entirely by something that was still processing, still metabolizing, but had a warmth underneath it that hadn't been there on Thursday. "He's free," Harry said. "Actually free. Not conditional, not provisional, he just flew away on a hippogriff." A pause. "It feels," he looked for the word. "It feels like something that was supposed to happen finally happened." "Yes," she said. "He wrote already. This morning. He wants to, he said when school's over he wants to find a proper house. Something that isn't the safe house." He met her eyes through the mirror. "He said he wants to find somewhere that has a room that could be Harry's." Those exact words. She felt something that had no name but that wasn't nameless. "I think that's a good idea," she said carefully. "I know it is." He looked at his hands. "Tonks. The past version, of me. The one from 3 hours earlier. I saw him in the corridor. Heading for the hospital wing." He paused. He looked, how did he look? "Exhausted," Harry said. He stopped. He looked like he was carrying a lot. On his own. He looked at her. I wanted to stop him. Just for a second. Just to tell him it was going to work out. He paused. "But I didn't, because you told me not to fix things. He looked at his hands. I watched him walk past." She was quiet. "And I thought," he said, "about how much had changed since I was 7. How much of it was," he stopped again. He was doing the thing he did with things that mattered, taking his time, finding the precise word. "How much of it was because someone chose to stay." "Harry, I'm not being dramatic," he said. He looked at her steadily. "I know who I am. I know what I have. That's not an accident. That's not the Dursleys not managing to destroy me, it's," he paused. "Someone showed up and didn't leave. And now I can walk through a castle in the dark and revise terrible outcomes and cast a Patronus through 6 Dementors." He met her eyes. "That's not luck." She held the mirror and felt the bond doing its warm, quiet, settled thing at her center, and her hair was the deep rose shade, and it was 3 in the morning in London, and she said, "You did all of that." "I just brought the books." "And the donuts," he said. "And the donuts," she agreed. "Those were very important donuts," he said. "Historically significant," she said. He smiled, the real one, wide and unguarded and warm. She collected it the way she'd been collecting them for 6 years, added it to the ones she kept somewhere that didn't need a location. "Get some sleep," she said. "You too." "I mean it." "I know you mean it, I know you know I mean it, I still mean it." He laughed. "Put the mirror away." She lay back in the dark, her magic settling from cold into its resting state, pink hair against the pillow, the bond a quiet, steady presence in the center of her chest. The slippage was still there, she'd need to address it carefully through the summer, work with the anchor memory, build the connection back to its full strength. That was manageable. That was work she knew how to do. What she was still learning was how to hold the cost of the bond alongside the worth of it and let both things be true simultaneously without diminishing either. She looked at the ceiling. She was getting better at it. The last week of term, she received a letter from Dumbledore. It was brief. Handwritten. The elegant, slightly archaic penmanship of someone for whom letters were still a serious medium. "The slippage in your sustained forms has come to my attention through Moody, with his full knowledge that I know, before you address that with him. I want to propose something for the summer that may help. I also want to tell you, in writing, because I find it is sometimes easier to receive things in writing that are difficult to say in person, what you chose 6 years ago, and have continued choosing, has changed the outcome of several things I had prepared myself to grieve. You should know that. The boy will face harder things than this year. The protection he carries, yours, and others, is not diminished by the difficulty ahead. If anything, what you have built is precisely what the difficulty will require. Summer regards, Albus. She read it twice. Folded it. Put it in the drawer with Moody's early notes and the coded correspondence and the original 17-point notebook about the wizarding world. She went to King's Cross for the end-of-year train. Harry came through the barrier looking taller than September, which was the literal truth and also something else. He had the qualities she'd been watching develop all year, not invulnerability but groundedness, the kind that comes from being tested and knowing the testing didn't change the fundamental thing. Sirius was not at the barrier, still laying low, free but carefully so, but he'd sent a letter with a joke about hippogriff travel and an address, and the address was a house he'd apparently been arranging through Andromeda while the Pettigrew investigation continued. Remus was there, thin and tired and warm-eyed, and he and Harry talked for 10 minutes about the year with the ease of people who have shared something significant and have processed it together into something that doesn't need ceremony. Hermione hugged Harry again. Ron shook his hand again and hugged him again. Neville this time, to everyone's mild surprise including Neville's, initiated it himself. Harry found her at the edge of the group when the goodbyes were done. He looked at her face. Her hair. The bond was warm and close and present. Summer, he said. Summer, she agreed. Ted's already planning the pancakes. Mum's already planned the reading list. I don't need a reading list. I know. She made it for herself and it has your name on it, which is her version of an invitation. She folded her arms. Sirius wants you at the new house by the second week of July. Remus is coming too. It's going to be a lot of people, he said. Yes. He looked at her steadily. Good, he said. Good, she agreed. They walked out of King's Cross together into the summer, and her magic was warm at the center, and her hair was pink in the sun, and his hand bumped against hers in the crowd and neither of them mentioned it, and the bond was a steady, quiet, present thing that had cost something real and been worth every penny. Chapter 6. The name he chose. The summer before fourth year smelled like cut grass and something serious was always burning in the kitchen. The house was in Devon, not grand, not hidden behind excessive enchantments or dramatic anti-muggle spells, just a large stone farmhouse at the end of a long road with a garden that had clearly been spectacular before 12 years of neglect and was currently in the process of being spectacular again. Sirius had found it through a squib estate agent who owed Andromeda a favor, and he'd spent 3 months making it habitable in the specific way someone makes a place habitable when they've spent 12 years in a cell, with a focus on light, on windows, on rooms that connected to other rooms without locked doors between them. Harry arrived on July the 5th and didn't leave until September. He had his own room. This was the thing Sirius had said in the letter, something that could be Harry's, and it was real, a room on the second floor with east-facing windows and bookshelves already stocked because Sirius had learned from watching Tonks what Harry's particular relationship with reading looked like, and a desk that was solid and properly sized for someone who spent long hours at it thinking. Harry stood in the doorway of the room on the first evening and looked at it for about 30 seconds in silence. Sirius was standing behind him in the corridor, doing a credible impression of someone who wasn't watching anxiously. If you don't like the shelves I can move them, he said. I like the shelves, Harry said. The desk is from a shop in Exeter. Remus said the previous one was too small, so, Sirius. Harry turned around. He looked at his godfather with the full-weight assessment, steady and green-eyed, and said, "It's perfect." Sirius visibly exhaled. Right. Good. He straightened his jacket. Dinner's at 7. Don't let Remus cook, he's earnest about it and the results are archaeological. I heard that, Remus said from somewhere downstairs. I meant you to, Sirius called back. He looked at Harry. I'll leave you two, he gestured at the room. The ownership of it. The fact of it. Thank you, Harry said. For the room. It's your room, Sirius said, as if this was simply the correct designation and didn't require more than that. He went downstairs. Harry turned back to the room, his room, east-facing windows, proper bookshelves, and Tonks appeared at the top of the stairs with her overnight bag because she was staying the week and had absolutely coordinated this with Sirius 3 weeks ago without discussing it with Harry, because some things were better as facts than as questions. Good room, she said. Good room, he said. She looked past him at the east-facing windows. Smart. Morning light. You'll actually wake up at a reasonable time for once. I wake up at reasonable times. You wake up before sunrise and read for 2 hours before you acknowledge the morning exists. That's not a reasonable time, that's a monastic schedule. That's how I get things done. That's how you miss breakfast. She dropped her bag. Remus is attempting dinner. I've already hidden the experimental spice rack. He can hear you. I know. I hid it anyway. She looked at him. He'd grown again over the year, was nearly her height now, which still surprised her sometimes, the boy from Privet Drive who'd been small for his age now standing eye level with her in a doorway in Devon. How are you? Good, he said. Then, more honestly, better than good. He looked at the room again. I keep expecting it to stop. The good thing. When has it stopped? He thought about this. It hasn't. No, she agreed. It hasn't. He looked at her. The almost smile and the real smile happening almost simultaneously now, barely a breath between them. Dinner's at 7. 7. Don't let Remus cook. You already said that. It bears repeating. The summer had a rhythm that built itself without anyone designing it. Mornings were Harry's, the early rising, the reading, the desk with the morning light, and then breakfast that Sirius or Tonks made, and then whatever the day required. Remus was there Monday through Thursday most weeks, spending weekends elsewhere, though he never specified where and nobody pressed. Andromeda and Ted came for 2 weekends in July and once in August, and the second July weekend involved a full dinner with everyone at the table and a conversation that ran from 6 until nearly midnight and covered everything from the Goblin rebellions to the proper construction of a defensive ward perimeter to an argument between Sirius and Ted about football that achieved tremendous volume without ever reaching a conclusion. Harry sat in the middle of all of it and listened and occasionally said things that redirected entire conversations without anyone quite noticing he'd done it, and Tonks watched this and thought, there he is. That's the person those years were building. He was working on wandless magic through July. Not dramatically, not the flashy visible variety. He'd read everything he could find on intent-based casting and had concluded that the limitation wasn't talent but expectation, that most wizards simply never tried because they'd been told it was difficult, and that the difficulty was largely psychological. He demonstrated this to Sirius one Tuesday afternoon by levitating 3 books off the shelf simultaneously while explaining transfiguration theory to Remus, as if the two things were entirely unrelated activities. Sirius stared at the books. James couldn't do that, he said. I know, Harry said. I'm approaching it differently. Differently how? He used it as a performance, Harry said, setting the books down neatly. Not unkindly, not dismissively, just accurately. It was a thing he did to be impressive. I'm using it as a tool. Different intent produces different results. Sirius opened his mouth. Closed it. Looked at Remus. He's right, Remus said. I know he's right, Sirius said. I'm just experiencing a series of emotions about it. Tonks looked up from the armchair. He told the Sorting Hat that ambition without judgment was just appetite, she said. In his first year. To its face. Sirius turned to look at her. You're enjoying this. Enormously, she said. Harry, from the table, almost smiled. The wandless work got sharper through August. By the last week he was doing quiet, controlled, functional magic without a wand as default when his wand wasn't immediately at hand, not showy, not demonstrative, just practical. Summoning things he needed, redirecting small objects, once catching a cup Sirius knocked off the table with a casual gesture that stopped it in mid-air 6 inches from the floor. Sirius looked at the stopped cup. At Harry. Could you do that in 4th year? He said. In class? Yes, Harry said. Will you? Probably not, Harry said. Not demonstratively. But I'm not going to be worse at something on purpose to make people comfortable. Remus looked at the ceiling briefly. That's fair, Sirius said. That's entirely fair. He rescued the cup. Your father would have used that specific skill to annoy Snape constantly. I know, Harry said. I've made different choices. The Quidditch World Cup was in August, and Sirius got tickets through channels that Tonks chose not to examine too closely, and they went, Sirius and Harry and Tonks, with Ted and Andromeda meeting them at the campsite, and it was the first time Harry had been in a wizarding crowd of that size. He handled it the way he handled everything, by being himself, which was the most disarming thing he could have done, because the wizarding world expected Harry Potter to be either a symbol or a disappointment and he was clearly neither. People recognized him. Of course they did, the scar, the eyes, the specific quality of him that was partly James and partly Lily and partly something that was entirely Harry. Some of them wanted to make speeches. He thanked them briefly and moved on without being rude, which was a skill she'd watched him develop over years of being noticed in the wizarding world, the art of being gracious without being a performance. The Irish won. Victor Krum caught the snitch in a move that made 30,000 people fall briefly silent before erupting. Harry watched it with the focused appreciation of one seeker observing another, not jealous, just interested, taking notes. The Death Eaters came at midnight. She had her wand out before the first tent went up, Auror instinct and Bond instinct firing simultaneously, and she found Harry without looking because she always found Harry without looking, and he was already moving, not away, toward, which was the most Harry thing and also the thing that made her gray before her time. With me, she said. I know, he said. They moved through the chaos together, which was entirely against every protocol she'd ever been trained to follow and which she didn't consider for more than half a second before discarding. She was not leaving him in the dark while Death Eaters burn things, and that was the beginning and end of the analysis. He was not frightened. She watched for it, not because she thought he'd break, but because fear was information and she wanted to know what he was working with. What she saw instead was the same focused readiness she'd seen in Quirrell's dungeon, in the Shrieking Shack corridor, in the Hogsmeade conversations where he laid out the tactical situation before she'd finished her first butterbeer. His eyes were moving, cataloging, assessing. 3 of them by the Treeline, he said quietly, close to her ear. Masks. One's left-handed, watch his wand. The one in the center is nervous, see how he's moving. She looked. He was right on all counts. How do you taught me to read people, he said. I applied it. They got clear. The dark mark went up, green skull, serpent, and the sound of it going up from the crowd, the specific terror of a symbol, and she felt Harry go still beside her, not with fear but with something harder and colder than fear, the recognition of what it meant and what it portended. Sirius found them at the edge of the field, white-faced and furious, and put his hand on Harry's shoulder briefly. Harry let it stay there, which was its own kind of communication. You all right? Sirius said. Fine, Harry said. You're not allowed to just say fine. I'm processing, Harry amended. That's better. Sirius looked at the mark in the sky. His jaw was tight. They'll be emboldened. This wasn't random. I know, Harry said. It's a message. To who? Harry looked at the sky. To everyone who hoped it was over, he said quietly. And to anyone who knew it wasn't. He looked at Tonks. He's coming back properly. This year or next. We don't know, yes we do, he said. Not with drama, not with performance. Just with the clean, level certainty of someone who has thought this through from every angle. I've known since the chamber. Since Quirrell. He's been working toward return since before I was born, and nothing that's happened since has stopped him, only slowed him. He turned from the mark. We should find Ted and Andromeda. They found Ted and Andromeda. They went back to the campsite. They rebuilt what was burned with magic and grim efficiency and made tea because that was what people did, and Harry sat in the rebuilt tent with his hands around a mug and said nothing for an hour while Sirius and Remus talked around and past each other in the specific way they'd always communicated, which was mostly through implication. Tonks sat beside Harry. He didn't say anything. Neither did she. The bond was warm and present, and sometimes that was the whole of what was needed. At some point his shoulder came to rest against hers, a slight shift in the dark of the tent, and she didn't remark on it, and neither did he. Outside, the mark was still in the sky. The letter about the Triwizard Tournament arrived in September. She read the Hogwarts letter about it the same day Harry did, because he sent her his copy by return owl with a note that said, "Thoughts?" She sat in her flat and read it and thought, this is trouble. Not the tournament itself, dangerous, yes, inadvisable for 14-year-olds, but structurally manageable. What she thought about was the timing. A tournament that required an age line, that gathered students from 3 schools, that would be an event of historical significance, in a year when the Dark Mark had gone up at the World Cup. She thought about who benefited from that specific combination of circumstances and what they might do with it. She wrote back, "Keep your eyes open. More when I see you." She then went to Moody's office and had a conversation that lasted 90 minutes and resulted in 3 things: an understanding that Moody had been asked to take the defense against the dark arts position at Hogwarts for the year, a formal assignment for her as attached security to the tournament proceedings under a cover that would hold scrutiny, and a very specific agreement that whatever they found, they told each other before telling anyone else. "Dumbledore knows," she said. Dumbledore asked, Moody said. "He asked you specifically." "He asked me, and I said yes, and I told him I was bringing you in the attached capacity." He looked at her over his desk. He agreed without argument. She thought about the letter in her drawer. What you chose 6 years ago, and have continued choosing, has changed the outcome of several things. "He knew I'd be there anyway," she said. "Probably," Moody agreed. "He's been getting better at working with the facts in front of him rather than the ones he planned for." He leaned forward. "The goblet of fire is not unbreakable. An extremely powerful confundus charm, applied correctly, could make it spit out a 4th name," she said. "Could make it spit out a specific name." They looked at each other. "When do we leave for Hogwarts?" she said. Harry's name came out of the goblet on a Friday evening, and she felt it through the bond before the prophet reported it, felt the specific quality of his shock, not fear, not anger, but the clean cold alertness of someone who has been ambushed and is already analyzing the ambush, and she was in Hogsmeade by Saturday morning. She found him in the corridor outside the trophy room, which meant he'd been walking and thinking, which was what he did when something needed to be worked through in motion. He looked at her when she turned the corner. His face did the thing it did when he was deciding how much he was all right. Then he seemed to decide something and said, "Someone put my name in." "I know," she said. "They used a very specific charm." "Moody thinks, Moody and I have already talked," she said. "Come on. Walk with me." They walked the corridor, long and stone and quiet in the Saturday morning, most students at breakfast. The bond was running the focused alert quality that meant he was genuinely in working mode, not the performed version. "The tournament's a trap," he said. "Yes. Not for me specifically, it wasn't set up for me. But whoever put my name in, they want me to participate for a reason." He looked at the floor as he walked. "The tasks are dangerous. But that's not the primary risk." He looked at her. "The primary risk is at the end. The final task is the one with the most variables, the most isolation. Whatever they're planning, that's where it happens." "That's our assessment too," she said. How do I stay in it and stay safe? You treat every task like Quirrell's dungeon, she said. You solve the problem in front of you. You use every advantage you have and you don't apologize for any of it. She looked at him steadily. You are not hiding your abilities this year. Not for fairness, not for appearance, not for Dumbledore's optics. If you know something, you use it. I was never going to hide them, he said. I know. I'm saying it anyway. He looked at her sidelong. You're worried. I'm focused, she said. There's a difference. Is there? The difference, she said, is that worry is passive and focus has a plan. She met his eyes. I'm assigned to the tournament. Official capacity. I'll be at Hogwarts for most of the year. Something in his face shifted, the focused alert quality didn't change, but something under it did, a slight easing, the knot loosening the way she'd been watching it loosen over years. Okay, he said. Okay, she said. The first task was dragons. She knew about them 4 days before. Moody confirmed. She went to Harry that evening, on the grounds, by the lake, which was where he went when he wanted to think outside, and told him directly. Dragons, he said. Hungarian horntail specifically. Yours. She watched his face. You have 4 days. He looked at the lake. She watched him think, the actual visible process of it, the eyes going slightly inward, the mouth going level, the stillness that preceded the working through. Then, I don't need to fight it. I need to get past it. Yes. It's chained, which means its movement is limited. If I can draw its attention upward, he paused. A broom. I need my broom. Accio from the castle, she said immediately. You can summon it. No reason you can't, the task rules don't specify. The other champions won't think of that. Good. She meant it. She had always meant it. What else? When its attention is up, it'll rear. That gives me 20 seconds, maybe 30, to get past it to the egg. He thought. Its tail is the real danger. The fire I can dodge. The tail sweeps wide and low, fly high on the approach, she said. Low on the pass, he confirmed. I'll have maybe 15 feet of clearance if I time the sweep right. He looked at her. I'll be fast. You're always fast. I'll be faster. He met her eyes. I know what I'm doing. I know you do, she said. I just want to say it out loud. Saying things out loud makes them more real. He looked at her. You're not going to tell me to be careful. You're always careful. You're just not timid. There's a difference. She held his gaze. Go fast and come back. I always come back, he said. He summoned his firebolt from the castle with a single, clean gesture and the broom came down out of the November sky like it had been waiting for the call, and he caught the handle without looking, and Tonks stood at the edge of the lake in the cold afternoon and thought, yes. That is exactly the thing my magic decided 6 years ago when he laughed. The task itself lasted 7 minutes. He was on his broom in 30 seconds, had the horntail's attention skyward in 2 minutes, was past it in 4, had the golden egg in his hands in 7. The crowd noise was a physical thing she felt in her sternum. She was in the stands in her cover identity, auburn and unremarkable, and she watched every second of it with the kind of attention that isn't available to spectators because spectators don't have a bond running warmth through their center in real-time feedback. He was fine. He was fine throughout. The dragon's tail came within 4 feet on the pass and he adjusted without breaking stride, a micro-correction of the broom angle that was so practiced it looked instinctive. It was instinctive. That was the point. He came in first place and she felt it through the bond as a warm, clear, uncomplicated satisfaction before the scores were even announced. The Yule Ball was in December and she went as herself. Not undercover, not in the attached security capacity, she went as Tonks, officially a guest of the Hogwarts staff for the event, which Dumbledore had arranged with a straightforwardness that told her he'd decided long ago that keeping her and Harry in separate boxes was less useful than acknowledging what was actually there. She wore dress robes that were deep green and she changed her hair to silver for the occasion, which she immediately changed back to pink because the silver felt like a performance and the pink felt like her. She wore the pink. She looked well in the pink. Harry was in the entrance hall when she arrived, in his dress robes, standing with Ron and the two girls they'd asked, a parvati each, and talking to Hermione and her date, Victor Crumb, with the pleasant easiness of someone who was genuinely interested in Crumb as a person rather than as a famous name. He saw her across the hall. She watched the Real smile cross his face, quick, warm, completely unguarded. He said something to Hermione and came through the crowd with the direct, unhurried movement she knew. "Silver," he said, when he reached her. "I changed it back." "Good." He looked at the pink hair. "Silver would have been wrong." "That's what I thought." She looked at him, dress robes, dark hair, green eyes, the scar under his fringe that she had somehow stopped seeing as a scar and simply seen as Harry. "You look taller," he said, preempting. "I was going to say good. I am also taller." "Yes," she agreed. "That too." She tilted her head at the hall filling up around them. "How are you finding it? The social obligation of it all." "Manageable," he said. "Parvati is lovely. Ron is going to have a complicated evening." He glanced toward where Ron was standing with a fixed smile. He told Hermione she looked nice and then immediately walked away, which was not the optimal sequence of events. "Did you tell her she looked nice?" "I told her that Crumb clearly had excellent judgment." He met her eyes. She seemed pleased with that. She looked at him. He was 14 3/4 and standing in the entrance hall of Hogwarts at the Yule Ball with a composure and warmth that she'd watched build from nothing, from a 7-year-old on his knees in a flower bed with grass-stained trousers and a careful watchfulness that had never had a reason to let up. "Come on," she said. "I want to talk to Fleur Delacour. She knows something about the egg and she's been sitting on it." "How do you?" "She's been in the library for 3 consecutive days and she keeps looking at the other champions like she's trying to decide whether information sharing is advantageous." "She's close to deciding yes." She started toward the hall. "Come translate. Your French is better than mine. My French is 5 months old. Your French is functional and precise and much better than my French, which is aggressively British." She glanced back at him. "Are you coming?" He came. The second task was in February. She knew what had been taken from him, knew from the bond, which had gone briefly strange in the night, the warm hum developing a quality she'd never felt before, something like absence, and she had 3 hours of cold certainty before he emerged from the lake with Ron over his shoulder and Hermione and Fleur's sister not far behind, and the cold certainty became warm relief in the specific way of things that were never quite in doubt but were still frightening. He came in second. He'd stayed past the time limit for the other champions and had still placed second, which the judges had accounted for with extra points for moral fiber, which was the first time she'd seen moral fiber formally scored. She met him at the edge of the lake as he came out of the water. He was shaking with cold and completely focused and looked at her immediately, which was the thing he did in crisis, orient to her specifically, and she handed him her outer robe and said nothing while he wrapped it around himself and got his temperature back. "I heard Hermione," he said, after a minute. "I know. In the water." She kept saying, "I could hear her voice telling me to think." He looked at the lake. "I knew it wasn't really her. I knew it was the enchantment. I thought it anyway, and it helped." "That's how it works," she said. "The people you carry, they work for you even in the echo versions." He turned to look at her. He was still cold, still shaking slightly, water still dripping from his hair. He looked at her with those green eyes and said, "What was taken from you?" She went still. "Something was taken," he said. "The bond went strange last night. Not wrong, not an emergency. But strange." He watched her face. "What was it?" She had been deciding whether to tell him this for 3 days. She looked at him, 14, cold, direct, the most honest person she knew, and said, "My notebook." He blinked. "You're, the one from the beginning," she said. "The 17-point notebook." She looked at the lake. "I've been carrying it for 6 years. It was in my jacket pocket when the mer people came." She paused. "I told them they could take it and they told me something was being held that was mine, and I told them to take what they found. And they took the notebook." He was looking at her. "The 17 points. About the wizarding world." "Yes. You've had it for 6 years. I've added to it." She met his eyes. It was full, mostly. "I'd been using the last few pages recently." She paused. "I didn't know they'd choose it. I thought they'd take," she stopped. "What?" "Something more obvious," she said. "Something more dramatic." She looked at the lake. "They took the thing I didn't know I'd miss until it was gone." Harry looked at the water. "The points are in my head," she said. "I know all 17 of them. I know everything I added. The notebook itself is just, not just," he said. "No," she agreed. "Not just." She looked at him. "It's all right. I told them to take it." "I know." He was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," she said. "I got Hermione back. That's the exchange." She met his eyes. "No contest." He held her gaze for a moment, then looked at the lake again. "The last entry," he said. "What was it?" She thought about it. She'd been writing in the back pages recently, adding things as they occurred to her, observations, thoughts, things that needed a page to be real. "I think the last one was something I wrote in January," she said. "What did it say?" She looked at the lake. At the winter surface of it, still and gray-green, the mer people somewhere below. "It said," she said carefully, "the thing you protect most clearly is the thing that shows you what you are. Pay attention to what you protect without thinking. That's where the real answer is." Harry was quiet. "I wrote it about the Patronus work," she said. "About how the memory you use tells you something about yourself you might not have articulated directly." She paused. "But once I wrote it I realized it wasn't just about the Patronus." He looked at her. She met his eyes. The bond was warm and present and the winter lake was gray behind them and his hair was still dripping and he was wrapped in her outer robe. "Okay," he said. She breathed out. "Okay," she agreed. The third task was a maze. She spent the weeks before it with the particular controlled tension of someone who has done all the preparation possible and is now waiting for the preparation to either work or not work. She was at Hogwarts. She was watching. She had a communication ward set at the maze entrance that would signal her the moment something wrong happened inside it. Harry was calm in the final days. Not the performed calm of someone suppressing fear, the real kind, the kind that came from having done the work and knowing the work was done. He trained in the evenings with a focus that made the other champions look, from a distance, slightly unfocused. Not because he was trying to demonstrate anything. He was simply trying to be ready. Being ready was the default state he'd been building toward since he was 8 years old with a practice wand and a copy of Principles of Defensive Magic. The evening before the task she found him on the grounds by the lake, which was where he went, and sat beside him on the bank in the June evening. "Tomorrow," he said. "Tomorrow," she agreed. "Someone's going to try to use the cup," he said. It wasn't a question. It had stopped being a question in September. "It's a portkey. The maze is the delivery mechanism. Whoever gets there first, yes," she said. "I won't let another champion touch it first," he said. "If I get there first, I can control what happens. Or not touch it at all." "Or not touch it," he agreed. "If there's another option." He looked at the lake. "But I don't think there will be." He paused. I think whoever set this up has been careful enough that the cup is the only exit. She looked at the darkening water. If you get there, when I get there, he said, without bravado. Just correction. When you get there, she amended, and it takes you somewhere, use the mirror immediately. Before anything else. Even if you're mid-situation. Okay. Harry. I said okay. I need you to hear it as a promise, not an acknowledgement. He turned to look at her. In the June evening, 14 years old, the lake dark behind him, green eyes steady. I promise, he said. Good. She looked at the water. Tell me something that has nothing to do with tomorrow. He thought about it. Sirius is thinking about getting a dog. She turned to look at him. He's a dog. He says it's different when it's a real dog. Harry almost smiled. He says he's been thinking about having someone to take on walks. He can take himself on walks. That's what I said. The almost smile became the real one. He said it wasn't the same. What kind of dog? He hasn't decided. He's been writing to me about it for 3 weeks. Each letter is about a different breed and the reasons it might or might not suit the house. The latest? Irish setter, Harry said. He said, and I'm quoting, it has enormous energy and questionable decision-making and reminds me strongly of your father in 3rd year. He seems to consider this an endorsement. She laughed, the real kind, the unrestrained version, and it startled the lake birds and her hair went amber briefly before settling back to pink. Harry watched the hair settle with the expression he had when something made him genuinely happy, which was not performed happiness but the quiet, present version. Tell him the Irish setter, she said, when she'd stopped laughing. I'm going to, he said. They sat on the bank in the June evening while the light changed and the lake went dark and the maze behind them stood waiting for tomorrow, and neither of them talked about it again, and the bond was warm and steady and the evening was the good kind of ordinary that he described to her once, sitting in front of a fire, watching the photograph of his parents. He came back from the graveyard at midnight. Not the way she'd rehearsed it in her head. Not the orderly controlled version with the mirror used as promised and the portkey trajectory calculated and the response coordinated. He came back the way these things actually came back, through chaos and pain and the kind of circumstances that plans didn't fully account for, and she was at the maze entrance when the cup deposited him on the grass and she was moving before it registered consciously. Cedric Diggory was dead. She understood this in the first 3 seconds, the way you understand things that you've prepared for and were hoping not to understand. Cedric was gone, and Harry was not, and Harry was holding the cup and not letting it go and there was blood on his robes from something that had happened to his arm, and she was on her knees in the grass beside him before anyone else reached the entrance. Here, she said. Just that. He turned to look at her. His eyes were, she'd never seen this specific thing in his eyes. Not fear, not grief exactly, not shock, though all of those were there. What she saw was the look of someone who has met something ancient and terrible and has come back with it still inside them. The look of someone who has had something confirmed that they'd been hoping wouldn't be. He's back, Harry said. His voice was steady in the way that came after the shock had passed through and left a person standing in the clearing it made. I know, she said. Voldemort. He looked at his arm. The wound from the bone spell, still bleeding. He used my blood. He said it made him invincible. His eyes came back to her. He said the protection my mother left couldn't touch him now because my blood was in his veins. She registered this. Filed it. Didn't let it show on her face what that particular piece of information was doing to her threat assessment. Did he say anything else? He's angry, Harry said. At everyone who abandoned him. At me specifically. He looked at Cedric's body, which had been covered now by 2 staff members. He killed Cedric because he was there and in the way. Just, because he could. His jaw tightened briefly. That's what he is. He kills people who are in the way. She put her hand on his wrist, the uninjured one. She could feel his pulse, steady and present. "You got back," she said. "I promised." He looked at her. The wound on his arm. The blood on his robe. The particular quality of his eyes in that moment, the eyes that had been her magic's north for 7 years and were looking at her now from the center of something very large. "I always come back." "I know," she said. The Aurors reached them then, and Dumbledore, and Madame Pomfrey, and the organized chaos of aftermath, and she moved with it, stood while Pomfrey worked on his arm, stayed in the room while Dumbledore talked to him, walked beside him to the hospital wing while the castle moved around them. She stayed until 2 in the morning. Then Pomfrey said he needed to sleep and she stood up from the chair beside his bed and he caught her hand before she could go, the same wrist grip she'd used on him on the grass, and she turned back to look at him. "Stay," he said. "Not desperate. Just, direct." "I'll be in the chair," she said. "I know," he said. He released her wrist. She sat back down. He slept. In the morning, when the castle was grey and quiet and Pomfrey was in her office and the hospital wing had the specific stillness of early dawn, Harry woke up and looked at the ceiling and said, without turning his head, "Are you awake?" "Yes," she said. "How long have you been awake?" "A while." He turned his head to look at her. She looked back. The morning was doing something quiet with the light, the way mornings do, pale and unhurried, and the bond was the warmest she'd felt it since September. "The stag," he said. "In the graveyard. I cast the Patronus. I heard. It held against 50 Death Eaters and Voldemort for 4 minutes while I got Cedric's body back to the cup." He said it plainly, not as a boast, just as a sequence of events. The stag just kept going. I didn't even have to sustain it, it sustained itself. He paused. "I think it's always going to sustain itself." "Yes," she said. "I think it is." He looked at the ceiling. "The memory I used." She waited. "I've been using the September afternoon for 3 years," he said. "But in the graveyard I used something else. Without planning to." He paused. "I used the conversation on the bank. Last night. You laughing at the Irish setter." He turned his head to look at her again. "It was the most recent version. The most present one." She was quiet. "I don't think the memory matters as much as the quality of it," he said. "What the mirror showed me in first year was the garden. What the Patronus used last night was the lake. Different images. Same," he looked for the word. "Same direction." "Yes," she said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I need to say something to you." "Okay." "I've been saying it in various ways for years," he said. "You know that." "I know you know that." He met her eyes steadily. "But I want to say the whole thing, plainly, without the version of it that lets you say, of course, or redirect to the donuts." She looked at him. "Okay," she said again. He took a breath. "You chose me," he said. "Before I was anything. Before I knew what I was or what I was capable of or what the world wanted from me. You came over a wall and fed me and came back in 11 days because you couldn't wait 2 weeks, and you kept coming back, and you were honest with me about everything, the bond, the cost, the slippage, all of it, because you decided I deserved the truth." He paused. "And I know the bond is yours and the magic is yours and I'm not saying what you feel is something I can name from the outside. But what I feel," he stopped. He was doing the thing he did with things that mattered. Finding the precise word. "What I feel is that you are the person I've been orienting to for 7 years. Every good decision I've made has been in some direction you showed me. Every time I've been in a dark place I've used the memory of something you made real." He held her eyes. "I'm not doing that because of the bond. I'm doing it because of you. The bond happened because of you. There's a difference." The hospital wing was very quiet. "I'm 14, he said. "I know that. I know what that means and what it doesn't mean. I'm not asking you to, I'm not asking for anything. He paused. I just wanted to say it completely. Once. So it was said. She sat in the chair by his hospital bed in the grey Hogwarts morning and felt her magic at the center of her, pink hair and present hands and the bond warm and steady and pointed north. I know, she said. I know you know, he said. I just needed to say it plainly. She looked at him for a long moment. At the face that was her magic's default, her resting state, the compass point. At the green eyes that had been honest with her every single time they'd looked at her. I chose you before I understood the bond, she said. I came back in 11 days because I couldn't stand the thought of another 3 days where you were in that house and I wasn't there. She met his eyes. I chose you every Tuesday. Every Hogsmeade weekend. Every time Moody gave me a look that meant I was prioritizing something he hadn't assigned and I prioritized it anyway. She paused. What I feel is, she stopped. Found her own precise word. Mine, she said. It's mine. I don't need to name it past that right now because naming it changes what it is and what it is right now is exactly right. He looked at her. Okay, he said. Okay, she said. The grey morning moved through the hospital wing windows and somewhere in the castle students were waking up and the year was ending and Voldemort was back in the world and there were large and complicated things ahead that both of them knew were coming and neither of them was afraid of. Harry, she said. Yeah. You're going to need breakfast. She stood up. Pomfrey said you need to eat before she'll sign the release and I've been here since midnight and I also need breakfast. She looked at him. I'm going to get food and I'm going to come back and we're going to eat it here before the world starts. Before the world starts, he said. It'll start without asking, she said. It always does. So we eat first. He sat up in the hospital bed, carefully, the arms still bandaged, the morning light doing what it did. Right, he said. Food first. Food first, she agreed. She walked to the door. Tonks, he said. She stopped. The name, he said. The one you hate. Nymphadora. He paused. I've never used it. No, she said. What would you do if I used it? Nothing, she said. You can use it. She met his eyes. You're the only person who could. He looked at her from the hospital bed in the pale June morning with the particular expression that had no name she'd given it, the one that wasn't quite the almost smile and wasn't quite the real smile but was something that lived between them, entirely its own thing. I won't, he said. Unless I need to. When would you need to? He looked at her steadily. When I want you to know I mean every word of it, he said. She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she walked out the door to get breakfast, and the bond was warm at the center of her, and her hair was the deep rose shade it went for specific things, and the June morning was beginning the way mornings begin in castles, with birds, and light, and the sound of something very old continuing to be. Behind her in the hospital wing, Harry Potter lay back against the pillow and looked at the ceiling and smiled, the real one, wide and unguarded and completely his own. Outside Hogwarts, the world was about to start. They'd have breakfast first.